Litchfield NH. Trying to connect, turn on.
Good evening and welcome to the August 16th, 2023 Litchfield School Board meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent. Is there any review and revision of the agenda for tonight?
Nope, there are a few links that have been livened up in there, but otherwise the agenda stands.
Awesome. And then board, with respect to the consent agenda, is there anything, folks, any meetings people want to move or committees to discussion under old business?
Just budget committee outstanding questions.
Okay, so we'll add that to old business. Moving forward, summary of non-public actions from August 2nd, 2023. Ms. Harrison made a motion to approve both the July 12th, 2023 non-public session minutes. Mr. Cutter seconded the motion. The motion passed 3-0-1. Ms. McDonald abstained. Ms. Harrison made a motion to nominate Tiffany Zucchi as CHS nurse. Ms. McDonald seconded. The motion passed 4-0-0. Ms. Harrison made a motion to nominate Joan Kerr as GMS OT part-time 40%. Ms. McDonald seconded the motion and the motion passed 4-0-0. Mr. Cutter made a motion to nominate Leslie Hall as GMS kindergarten teacher. Mr. Cutter seconded the, it says Mr. Cutter made a motion and he seconded it, so we gotta figure out who. You're very powerful, but I don't think you can make a motion and second it. But so somebody else seconded it and the motion passed 4-0-0. We do not have a student rep with us tonight. Hopefully when school starts, we'll have someone joining us. There are no presentations and recognitions. Moving, says we wait till 5:45 for community comment, but hey, we're here, so let's just do it. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak tonight? Okay, seeing none, we are going to go ahead and close community comment. Moving on to correspondence.
Sorry, maybe we'll wait till.
The link is in the agenda.
Yeah, I can't get into Wi-Fi here for some reason.
Here.
I did it.
Yep.
Thank you.
It linked. Thank you.
On 8/2, Andrew Cutter forwarded school warrant articles. Also on 8/2, Doug Taunton sent us a message regarding a variance request. 8/4, Dr. Jetty sent us special meeting information with responses from Andrew Cutter, Tina Harrison, and Peter Plansky, and Heidi Ames. Oh, no, Heidi Ames wasn't on that one, the next one. 8/8, Gail Berenger, asking about Clause 7 in the property and sales. Responses and replies from Peter Plansky, Heidi Ames, Mike Jetty, and Andrew Cutter. 8/10, Kayla Collins shared special meeting schedule and proposed warrant article. 8/11, Dr. Jetty, agenda for August 16th. 8/12, Heidi Ames, correspondence with a former employee. 8/15, Jan Sullivan, draft minutes from 8/2 meeting. 8/15, Ann Inamorati, manifests. 8/16, Kate Stevens, requesting outdoor recess for LMS students, understands the difficulties with implementation, requested a community forum. 8/16, Casey Bernard, requesting unstructured recess at LMFs. 8/16, Doug Totten sent us end-of-year financials, and I believe there are a couple more, or one more you sent, Doug, that I didn't get to, but I will add it right now. And that was regarding,
That is a good question. What was it?
I don't know.
I will tell you later.
Oh, I think it was regarding the computer question. There was a question about computer and Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi
at the
at
middle
Okay,
school.
oh, it's, and
And-
LMS is all set, or,
Well,
No,
CHS
well.
and GMS is all set. LMS, they have to wait for there to be a non-school day because they have to take away the Wi-Fi for a couple days.
Oh.
So they're planning on getting it all set after a vacation.
awesome. Thanks, Doug.
All right, thank you for correspondence.
Why would we do that after vacation? We can talk
No,
about that after.
Okay.
after a school
School
vacation.
vacation.
I don't think they're ready to do it now, so, but by the time they're ready to do it, the kids will be in school, so then they have to wait for a vacation at that
We
point.
are on vacation.
Yes.
All right, moving on to general business, superintendent's report.
So just wanted to talk with the board briefly about our website. So the lists that you have linked there are the items that have been completed regarding the website. The website rolled out live, I think before our last meeting. I think it went live that day or the day before. There have been a lot of enhancements that are being made to it. It looks pretty good. It's a much cleaner interface. It reacts much better with mobile devices than the old website. So you can see here, these are the items that that Kayla has tracked with Chris and the website committee regarding what has been done, and then items that are pending. I will tell you that Griffin's Logan got updated this afternoon, so you now have a, sorry? You have a happy tiger and not a Siberian tiger. The language translation feature, which Google has a fabulous feature embedded into it for those who know how to use it, but now there is a button there so that you can translate the website into different languages. So that's a plus for the people in our community who would appreciate that. We are looking to add the feedback section or button so that anybody in the community with suggestions, we're kind of holding off on that. Like, we want to get it almost done before we have people telling us it's not quite done, right? So that's coming. And then we will have images from our Welcome Back Kickoff event that we will post on the district page. So if you look at the district page right now, there's a lot of white space at the top. We're waiting for those photos, so that's coming. And then the Facebook feed button, I believe, is active, but don't quote me on that. So, so those are the things that are still to come. One of the things I wanted to bring to the board's attention is the color scheme question. So if you remember, when it was originally designed, we went with the 3 school colors. So we had orange, we have blue, and we have red, representing the key colors, and they're here on our symbol. It's our logo. And we use green on the district page. That got changed to blue by the website committee. The problem is that when you're on there now, there's no branding of it. It looks just like the LMS page. So the LMS page and the district page are, you know, aside from the logo, which certainly lets you know that you're somewhere different, it doesn't match with the branding scheme. So I'm looking for the board input on what you want to do. This had come up before. This goes back before me, and somehow we had settled on a maroon color. And so that was always the district color, but that's nowhere in our logo. We had settled on the green because it was one of the other colors remaining, yellow being the other, and green was preferable to yellow. But I'm going to urge, you know, apparently it was board feedback that resulted in the undoing of the green, but it really is not branded in a way that makes it clear where somebody is. So I'm looking for feedback on what you want to do.
So the problem with the green, as I remember it, is on the mobile device, the entire background was green and you couldn't read things. It was very difficult to read. On the website page, if you're just talking about the bar across the top, that's essentially going to be, I don't have an issue with that being green, or the bus routes, dining services, the tabs on the circles on the bottom being green. I think the issue is how much green is on the mobile part of things.
I believe the original beta site, the entire thing was green.
Yeah, it was.
And then when it got livened up, there's a lot of white space in the middle. The green is more of an accent color top and bottom.
Yeah.
So if the board's comfortable switching back to green in those areas, it certainly has it stand out that you're somewhere different than LMS. But currently, if you toggle between LMS and the district page, the colors are the same and the feel is the same. And you'll notice that all 3 pages actually say Litchfield School District at the top, because that's I don't know the term for it, but it's like a banner. And so the only way to know that you're on.
They switch?
No, they switched.
They
to the
switched.
school.
Oh, they do switch the name?
Yesterday, they were all Litchfield School District.
Yes, they were.
Yeah. I
Yeah, they
checked it
switched.
yesterday, but they switched
See,
now.
it's emerging by the minute.
So I like that. I mean, I'm partial to navy, as you look at my wardrobe or anything that I own.
I'm okay with the blue, quite frankly.
Yeah, I would, you know, you could go darker with the district page and maybe a little brighter with a more royal blue with the middle school page, but,
Looks like a different blue.
I mean, there are other districts that have navy and
That looks darker than this.
so I don't have a problem with the way it is, but for the board or
So here's the middle
whatever
school.
feedback.
I
Yes,
feel
the
like this should be a
district-
website
this is-
committee conversation. I
It's kind of
as a
shaded.
board member, I
Here, yeah.
put it in the hands of the website committee to
The
do what
website
looks
committee, I
best.
mean, admittedly, we haven't met in some time.
Yeah.
Like there is a difference.
But the
There's the
green
middle
was
school, it's
terrible.
kind of shaded
Yeah.
here.
And it was all over,
And
so.
the idea was blue was most appealing visually on the mobile, which we went that direction, so. I'm good with the blue, but I think it's clear by looking at the top where you are.
Yeah, now that it says that each of the schools, that helps a lot.
Yeah.
So I think the direction is to leave it as is.
Is that okay?
Is there any other feedback?
Any other feedback from anyone else?
No, the Campbell
Anyone
one,
feel
the Campbell
strongly?
one is red. The middle school is always blue. I don't see a reason to change it from being blue. It's a little bit different blue. But it's,
Change of shade.
yeah, it's just a little shading.
So quite honestly, this isn't what it was an hour ago. Because, look at the district page, and it's
Yeah.
back to the maroon L.
Oh, is he doing this
No, I
live?
don't see that.
No, I've got the what's on your shirt is on my corner.
Yep, that's what I see too.
Hang on. Well, look what I have.
So there, I think you might have a caching issue.
Yeah. I mean, it was that an hour ago, and now I just look and I'm like, wait a minute, the L is back. Where did that come from? So I don't quite know.
That is not the experience that I have. The moment
But
that
you-
matters is right for me.
Yeah.
Let me hit reload. And yeah, I got the maroon L, so don't.
Well, you gotta pay extra.
The L.
I pay $20 a month and I have this one, so it's
and-
nice.
All right, so I'll work on the color question with
Yeah.
Chris and Kayla, and I'll try to figure out where my old L came from.
I mean, I prefer the blue. If we can go darker on the district page and brighter on the, with a more royal blue on the LMS page, I think that's enough delineation. My 2 cents.
This is mind-boggling anyway. All right, we'll keep working on the website. Any other comments or feedback?
Yeah, there's a great district calendar, and it said that the calendar was going to be linked with all of the other district calendars, but there's nothing on the calendar right now.
That's coming, right?
They're building it.
Okay,
So actually, let me back that up. The calendars have been built.
okay.
They're in the process of populating and consolidating, and then it will be live and up on here. So yes.
I think that would be great to do sooner rather than later.
Will sports be on it?
That would be up to whether the high school
Things should be.
and middle school have it on there.
One-stop shopping, I hope.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a lot. I mean,
that's okay though, because you can click and you can follow whatever calendar you have.
I will say the Find It Fast buttons are great. It was nice to be able to, when someone posted on the mom's page, hey, bus routes are out, to be able to go, bus routes, and it was right there.
What's for lunch at GMS? 20 posts.
Yeah, no,
Already?
we don't have a calendar out yet, but I know that Lauren will have it out before the first day. Yum. Okay. So that is the website update. Anything else on website, anybody? All right, opening days.
so I sent out, I think the board was included in the communication regarding opening days. That went out to all staff in multiple formats yesterday. So it was sent as a text message for people that we had numbers for. It was sent as an email through School Messenger and an email through our email server. So just to review it with the board quickly so that you can see what we have planned. Remember that Monday and Tuesday are new teacher orientation or new faculty orientation. So Mary has an agenda. It covers everything that'll be covered. There was a link to that in the communication that came out. On the first day for all staff to come back on Wednesday, basically there's an opportunity to check in at each school at 7:30 in the morning. That way, as everybody comes back, there's a formal greeting, welcome, and so forth. And then that's the day for our faculty to work in their classrooms, their offices, doing whatever they need to do to get ready for the opening of school. Our staff feedback last year, we shifted to that last year in light of the LMS project. It allowed teachers to get stuff out of boxes, and the staff loved it. So we kept it. So that's our welcome back. Paraprofessionals will also go to Campbell Auditorium, and we have a full day of PD that Sophia has planned for all our paraprofessionals. And so they will have that training provided to them at Campbell on that day. So it is a required work day for all of the paras. If you click the tab for the 24th, which is Thursday, you can see what we have planned for the Welcome Back formal district event. This is the event that board members have attended in the past, and the board chair has made opening comments in the past. So Heidi will have to coordinate that. There's a slideshow with an opportunity for a slide or two if you wish.
Okay.
And so we'll be in the Campbell Auditorium starting at 7:30. And that will include recognizing all new staff to the building, so they'll come down and be photographed and introduced by school. And then we'll also have service recognition. So we have everything from people who have hit the 5-year mark and will receive a certificate for that. And we have somebody at the 50-year mark, and so they'll be recognized for that also. So that's our event.
Who's that? They should get board recognition right now.
Sure.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right, I knew that, okay.
So then at around 9:15 or so, we'll take a comfort break, and then what we're going to do is all staff, everybody who's there is going to get on a bus. That's the dry run bus day, so we have 10 buses running around Litchfield that morning, testing out routes, getting to know how to go. You know, they practice with drivers, like emergency routes. If there's a road closed, how would I get the bus from here to there? So they're in town doing all of that work that morning. We will load up on the 10 buses and head down to GMS. And when we get to GMS, Dan and Maura will be training their staff to make sure that they know how to provide tours of the building. So basically, I really want to make sure that all of our staff, even those not assigned to GMS, if you teach at the high school or you teach at the middle school, that you have a chance to go in and see the situation down at GMS, that you understand the teaching climate, or not the teaching climate, the classroom climate that's there. I think people need to get their head into the 1930s building and see what people are talking about when they talk about the 1930s building. People need to see walls that are cracked and holes that are in ceilings and all that stuff that exists there, so that we can have everybody understand why there is an emphasis by the administrative team and the board on a new school. And so I want to make sure that all of our staff understand what that looks like and what that means. So Dan and Maura are working on a sheet of talking points so that there's that common experience. You know, those who are not walking from portables to buildings need to understand, here's what it means to move kindergartners from a portable to a lunchroom, for example. So we'll do all of that work that morning. We'll then come back to the high school on the buses, and we have our meetings for both the LEA and the LSSA, and then we will have a barbecue lunch. The rest of the time is dedicated toward just the boatload of training that we need to do. We were just talking before the meeting, there's well over 5 hours worth of professional development that our staff need to do, and we're dedicating time that afternoon so that they can work on that and to be ready for the start of school. I'm not going to go through the agendas for the other day, Friday, because they are based on the building. And so you can see that if you toggle through GMS to LMS to CHS, it's really a focus on PLC time, goal setting, norm setting, making sure that people understand, you know, the high school is using adaptive scheduler for the first time. They need to know how to use that. The middle school, you know, we invested $25,000 in training our staff in responsive classroom. We need to make sure that all staff before school starts understand that training and how to roll that out. So those are the items that you see sprinkled throughout the professional development for our staff on the last day. There's also at GMS, traditionally, our kindergartners need a chance to come in and meet a teacher and know that's the person I'm looking for on the following Monday, kind of thing. So all of that's embedded into the work that we do. And then, of course, students arrive on Monday morning, and we are
Ready to go.
you know, at the tip of day 180 as we start to count our way into that school year. So, any questions or comments? Can I, just a quick show of hands, who thinks they might be joining us on Thursday for any of the festivities in the morning? Heidi? Tina?
I'll try to make it. I don't know what my schedule is yet.
Thursday, what time is,
7:30.
tell me the date of the Thursday now.
24th. And we start at 7:30 and we'll be done by 9:30. Although you're welcome to come on a tour, Peter, so you could hop on a bus with us. If you haven't been on one in a while, it's
No, it's been a long time
It's
since I've
fun.
been on the bus.
all right. So
Anyone who wants to be there, great. Anyone who can't be there, that's totally fine too. It's just to have some board representation to say thank you. I'll be there.
there's
I'll
a
have to
slide.
look at the calendar.
A slide that announces all the board members, and then if you're there, you're invited to stand, and Heidi has
I'll wait.
Heidi has to stand, she's
Yep.
not just invited, so.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions on opening days, moving into business and operations. This is the second meeting of the month, so we have our financial reports, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Totten.
Yeah, so a little bit less of a financial report. So in the summertime, what happens is that once we complete our audit, it impacts both this year and the previous year. So we wait for all the audit numbers to run through before we do the financial reports. So next meeting, I'll have a financial report which kind of goes over July. And then the second meeting in August, we'll get back to our typical, which would be August at that point. So the first link is just the transfers. There's hardly any new, nothing really of high value. The second link is as of this morning, where we are matching up with the auditors. We believe we're at a final number for what will become the fund balance for last fiscal year. So there are 3 tabs on that link. If you look at the first tab, that kind of breaks down the start of the fund balance, which is, you get your fund balance from revenue that's over the expected revenue, as well as expenses that are under budget. And then we start subtracting out what was voted on at the district meetings through the warrant articles, as well as the assigned fund balance that was voted on from the school board. And then there were transfers that were necessary to bring the food service to 0, because it has to be self-funding, it has to end at 0 or in the positive, as well as some board decisions in regards to using the capital or transferring money to the capital projects fund. So once we start with the 1.2 million, we are reducing taxes for this next tax cycle of $442,773. So again, how that works is that money doesn't get dispersed now amongst the taxpayers. Instead of, that money gets, if we have a certain amount that we're raising for next year's school, it's just that amount minus the 442,000. So everyone pays less next year by their proportion of that. So as we look back at the last 4 years, other than COVID, fiscal year 20, which a lot of schools had very high fund balances, we were above the average other than that year. If you look to the revenue tab, the revenue was quite over what was projected, so you can kind of see where that came from. So some of it was from state revenue, which they wanted to bring back to reduce taxes. Some of it was the impact fee. So again, we work with DRA to project revenue, and that's what they use to set the tax rates. And then we either go under that, which wouldn't be great, or we go over that. I don't think you ever hit it exactly equal. So we were over. So again, that will be used now this following year to reduce the taxes.
Doug, there was a question from the budget committee regarding the over-expected revenue for 222K.
Yes.
So is that part of this? Is it easy enough to separate out to answer that question?
So I think when they asked that question, the revenue was less than this. So and then we kept on adding to that revenue.
Okay.
We kept on identifying what that revenue was. So when they last saw something similar to this,
It was
222. And I don't know if I'm guessing it wasn't because that's a big jump up. So I don't know if that 241, which was other than House Bill 1211, I don't know if that was 222. That's what I'm thinking might have been the 222 at that point.
Right.
So House Bill 1211 went out to every school district as reimbursement from the state to, again, one-time tax break. And then you can see the other over-unders, which were all over, would add up to the rest of the 241,000.
So that should answer that question then.
Yep, we'll just need it confirmed in that little sheet there, and we'll get it back over to the budget committee.
So just to be clear, I don't think the screen is projecting at home for people on TV. So the $442,773 number, that has been confirmed by the auditors, and we just need to wait for DOE or DRA to confirm that.
Yeah, I don't think typically DOA or DRA really changes it, because it's
Okay.
really coming from the auditors, which agree with our system as
Yeah.
well. So I did put that in there because it goes into the DOE 25, which feeds into the MS 22, which then goes, which is a DRA form, which combined with the town then creates our taxes, or Litchfield's taxes, for next year. So they haven't seen it yet. I don't think they really changed the number, because it's
Yeah,
coming from the
yeah.
auditors at that point.
I'm proud of that. I think that's
That's
a,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
proud of that balance that's going back. I mean, after a very difficult financial year and, all the schools really tightening their belts, and again, there weren't necessarily freezes of any kind, but certainly people were careful, and I'm proud of that number. I'm proud of the district for that number, so good job all around.
We should be proud, and we should thank everybody for pitching in to, protect that. But I'd be remiss not to point out that's also a lot of positions that went unfilled.
Agreed.
That we really
And
needed to do
that
that.
results in a toll on our staff. And we just need
Sure.
to acknowledge that those who stayed with us and worked, when we didn't have one-on-ones, we had people doing 2-on-1s and 3-on-1s, which is a heavier lift.
Yeah.
And so, again, there was
That's greatly
a
appreciated.
toll that goes with that, right?
I'd much rather have the personnel than the money going back to taxpayers, to be
Exactly.
honest, to meeting student needs. But in this environment where we couldn't hire and we did what we could to hire, it's appreciated what everyone did to pitch in to get to that number. So I just want to say a quick thank you.
So to clarify, the 442 will come out of, or be reduced the 2024 budget that we vote on in March?
No.
Taxes.
Well, taxes, yeah, so, yeah, the budget that we voted on in March, certain amount, and then instead of raising that total amount in taxes, obviously you deduct what the state brings in
So
first.
that would be like marked on the warrant article or in the paperwork?
No, you won't see it on that, it goes into
It's part of the budget process then?
it will go into your, I guess your December tax bill will be.
When tax rate setting is done, so the town is gonna have a tax rate setting with DRA this fall. And they're gonna say, we already have $442,000 that we've raised, it's carried over. So we don't need to raise that. So they sort of say, how much do we need to raise? Deduct out that 442, and you're gonna raise the balance. So it's sort of like a credit toward the tax bill. So then, when they set your December tax bill, that's money that's already in hand and dispersed among all the taxpayers.
Shouldn't we advertise that, though? Shouldn't we somewhere that be
That's-
shown?
I would love that,
You
right?
know?
Because if everyone got a little check in the mail, I think everyone would be like, oh, yay, great, this is
No,
awesome.
I don't
but-
necessarily mean send everybody a
Yeah.
check, although I'd love a check, but we should account for it somewhere, so everybody knows it's included in the number.
We can certainly get out there that that's an amount that we already have in hand, and if you look at the bottom of that spreadsheet, it's a little higher than what we've had some years, but not as high as the fiscal year 20 year, when we really avoided a lot of costs because of the shutdown, frankly. That's how we ended up with 708,000 that year.
And again, I hope we don't ever have to do that.
No. But, 442, it was 337, 265, we talk about it here, but you're right, Peter, we never really promote that as money that we have.
Yeah. Perhaps that's, well, I don't want to necessarily tie two issues together, but that's certainly something I think, when people are trusting us with money for GMS, I hope they see, I understand, I hope it goes towards rebuilding trust, I'll just say it that way, yeah.
And we do mention it, like, during deliberative sessions when we're having community forums and we're talking about the budget, that we do return we return anything that's unspent at the end of the year. We're not allowed to retain it.
But return versus a credit,
Right.
they
Reduce.
just feel differently,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
If you get a rebate in
Yeah.
the mail with a check and you're like, oh yay, I get $100 versus
Yeah,
your bill is $100 less,
it's like a discount, like a coupon.
something. Anyway. And anyone who wants to view this document can go on the agenda, and it is public for people to see. I just want to, again, because I don't know what's being shown, so I just want to say that out loud. So if people want to see what prior fund balance returns were and how this number came to be, again, it's available online on the agenda with a link. Any other questions from the board? Anything else you want to add to your
No, all
report?
set, thanks.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
That would be a good question, I think, to talk about the internet piece. Did you get the answer to that question when we were talking about correspondence and Doug's
I'll bring that up, but
correspondence?
I also just wanted on LMS on that subject, right? Renovations at the kitchen done?
So we had our construction meeting today. The kitchen looks beautiful. It's pretty much in play. Health and Human Services is coming on Monday to do their inspection because they have to sign off that all the equipment meets all the standards. So that will take place on Monday. But it really it's remarkable how different it is there. Our next facilities meeting is taking place at LMS, so we can tour and take a look at the kitchen and the other work that was done. The lighting company is on site yesterday through Friday. They're tuning all the lights and programming everything relative to the lighting system. And then they'll be doing a training for us at 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon. So we will have our staff trained up on the lighting system. Remember, it's computerized. It's pretty sophisticated. A teacher can go in and choose among a couple of the different light schemes. So there's like a cooler light, a warmer light, and it
Is that
really.
why the lights were on at LMS? I saw that somewhere on Facebook, that the lights were on at LMS.
Yeah, and so to highlight that point, the lighting company is in the middle of programming now, so the lights have to be left on 24/7. They are going off if the room is unoccupied. So I drove around last night, Jen, what time was it that I called you? 6:30 when I did a loop around, and there were a few lights on, but it wasn't lit up like a Christmas tree, which when I saw the email, I thought I was walking into, okay, what do we have? It wasn't that bad. There were a few lights here and there, but there were more lights than normal because of the programming. That'll be resolved by Friday, and then we'll be back to, lights coming on when necessary, when the building's occupied.
And we did communicate to the LPD for the lights being on, so they would be aware and not think that somebody had accidentally broken into the building or.
We had another squatter.
So,
Thank you.
anything else on?
Not on that, but thank you for the update on the kitchen. A couple of other things that we talked about, the Wi-Fi. It sounds like we have the equipment, but it needs to be programmed or installed at the next break that the kids will have.
Yeah, let me go back to,
But I'm assuming that it's now turned on at CHS and GMS.
it is turned on at both.
So there's, so if I walk in, is there like a splash page that I receive? Like what should?
So, to be
people
honest,
expect?
I'm not sure because we're on our district devices are recognized, so I haven't experienced the splash page.
I believe it says LPSD public or something like that. I haven't had to use it, but it's showing up as a network on my phone.
Okay. The other question was the surge protection that the board authorized
At LMS.
at LMS.
So the surge protection is coming this fall.
It's been ordered. They're looking to get a timetable on when it's gonna get shipped. There's been multiple communication, because we keep asking the same question. They don't have a firm date on when it's coming in at this point. Just like other equipment, sometimes we get a firm date pretty quickly and sometimes we don't. But it's been communicated, ordered, and then when it comes in, they're gonna install it on a weekend, because they have to shut off the power. So weekend or holiday, they'll shut off the power. It's less than a day's job, and we'll get it in as soon as, pretty quickly after it arrives.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I thought the last meeting we said we had that, or it was gonna be installed
I thought so too.
by the 14th.
No,
Not the,
Not the surge
not the
protection.
surge.
yeah. We talked about a bigger breaker last week, or last time, that was supposed to come more in December, but came earlier.
Yeah.
And that's been installed.
Confusing the two.
Yeah, but the surge has just been kind of waiting for an answer as far as delivery.
All right, seeing no other questions, moving on to public minutes. Is there a motion to approve the August 2nd, 2023 public minutes?
I make a motion to approve the August 2nd, 2023 minutes.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the August 2nd, 2023 minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That passes 5-0-0. Moving to old business, the land purchase.
So, what you have here is the draft warrant article that our attorney has put together. And this is relative to the special meeting, right? So this is the language that Gordon is recommending. Can you see the comments that I made on that? Okay, so, the yellow. So, we were trying to figure out whether we could shorten that up. We really want to present a clean, plain language warrant article that is as tight as possible. So I've asked our attorney, Gordon, to take a look at that. He has gotten back to me to say, well, there are certain things we have to say. Sometimes, the language can seem a little bit outdated or repetitive because that's the way that we have to do it to make sure that we get it. But I'll take another look at it and ensure that it doesn't say more than it needs to. So for right now, that's the draft warrant article for a special meeting. But we have time. It doesn't have to be posted until, we're gonna get to that next. If you click on the calendar, the meeting calendar, this lays out the timeline, and thank you for board members getting back to me. If we're going to have deliberative on the 12th, which is session 1, and then vote on Tuesday, October 17th, there were just some things that we needed to do. And you can see that posting of the warrant, so the language has to be done by Monday, August 28th. And then we will have to get it into a newspaper within 7 days of that. So in theory, we will probably have to have like a poll vote to make sure that we're all on board with the actual warrant that needs to be posted, and then have board members come by to sign it. But honestly, it'll be, whatever Gordon tells us we need to ask is kind of what we need to ask, so.
I just find this extremely vague, as such conditions as the board determines. I think, we've been charged in the past of having very vague warrant articles because we have to follow certain specific language, but if we don't know what the terms are of the agreement,
Right.
I think we have to nail down what those terms are before we can have a warrant article asking voters to approve them.
And I think it needs to be very specific.
I agree.
The would entitle the seller to a share of the proceeds. That needs to be outlined what share of that proceeds are. So if there's gonna be a separate deal with the seller, then all of those conditions need to be here clearly outlined.
So what, I raised that exact point. I anticipated what you were saying, so I raised that point with Gordon. He said the hope would be that we have the actual renegotiated purchase and sales that has all that in it by then. But he said you wouldn't want to incorporate all that into the warrant article because your warrant article is, the purchase and sales is like 8 pages long, so,
Right.
but he said his thought was that the public would, okay, this is the question that we have to vote on, and here's the purchase and sales that I can lay my eyes on and read the clear language. So if that says exactly what the repurchase would be, that
And
I can
that's
make that
fine.
link.
But in that case, I think that it's one question. It's, do we authorize the purchase and sales? I would just, if we can take everything else out
Do
of
we
the warrant
authorize
article.
spending the funds?
Right,
Expending the money that's already been raised earlier than what's been.
Right.
You're gonna have to make whatever, if there's a new purchase and sale, because this purchase and sale, and we've gone round and round, and, this purchase and sale agreement does not in any way tie the sale of the property to the approval of the school. I had a lawyer friend look at it, I had a lawyer who works for me look at it, it's not covered. The term is, it talks about the property, the word property is capitalized. In fact, I think we should have actually paid Mrs. Riley July 14th or something. That's when it was supposed to close, if her piece was approved. There's nothing in this that says she has to sell, she has to wait for her money. So my concern is
Your own
this.
attorney disagrees with that, Peter, just to be clear.
Who's attorney?
The district.
Attorney.
Okay.
The
The
district's
the
attorney.
board's attorney drafted this, or was part of it, right?
Her attorney drafted it.
Okay, but we made edits, right? Edits were made by both sides.
Correct?
And our attorney, based on that purchase and sales, drafted the warrant article that went before the voters. So, that warrant article and that stance and position was taken by the school district's attorney to
Okay.
protect the school district.
And I can tell you, just from taking the temperature of the town and having attorneys that I know look at it, including a real estate attorney, look at it and say, it doesn't, and it's very specific. It's the 2-year extension piece is just on the property. Doesn't mention the school. We can't spend the money unless we change the warrant article, and that's what we're gonna try to do. one of the issues I have is, this was signed in September of 2022, right?
September of 2022, yes.
What's the date?
91.
Yep. And it
September of
was-
2022, it was signed, and then the warrant article, I think, to change to include the requirement that the school be approved happened in November or December.
Purchase and sale became public in December, and the
Okay.
warrant articles were drafted initially December, January with draft language, and they were, December, January, and finalized and went January, mid-January.
And the
So-
purchase and sales was public information as soon as it was signed.
Correct.
So just pulling it
that-
back to the agenda, right, in the proposal, this is I'm reading the warrant article as not final. I'm reading it as a draft, right, and I think the board has an opportunity to come in here and write it how we think, or at least comment how we think it should be written.
You absolutely have that opportunity, but I just wanted, I want to clarify and correct. So we signed it September, whatever the date was. We released it on December 6th. There was a press release that went out on December 6th, and if you remember, we sat on the purchase and sales while we waited for the appraisal on the land. Because we did not know how the land was gonna appraise out. We really didn't know if either party was getting everybody felt good about it, but until you actually get the appraisal completed, you don't know. And once the appraisal came back and resonated with the agreed upon thing, then we went public. But we didn't go public until that point. It took
Thanks for clarifying.
a while.
Right. But again, it's been public since December of 2022. The warrant article was public. People had the purchase and sale prior to the vote. And until this meeting right now, or until these recent emails back and forth, there's been no statements by board members, public or private, that that it didn't agree with the purchase and sale. I have a concern with that. And I have a concern with showing it to, I mean, we're board members, you represent the district. Taking it to private attorneys?
It's a friend of mine, an attorney who does some work for us. I wanted somebody else's, other than I look at a lot of contracts, but I'm not an attorney. Okay, so I wanted somebody else to look at it with some knowledge of the process. And I don't know that I saw this purchase and sale, but Ms. Behringer sent an email. There was some other conversation about this section 7. The closing date will be on or before July 2023. So my concern is, did Mrs. Riley, which is why I've asked for the correspondence between the attorneys, where is Mrs. Riley's request? Because, we have not a great reputation, guys.
So just to answer that, and I've urged the board to stop communicating with people other than Mrs. Riley's attorney. She is represented by an attorney, and that counsel has given clear, unequivocal communication to me. I've shared that with Heidi,
I have read it.
and Heidi and I concur that it
Am I
is
not
clear
allowed
and
to see it?
unequivocal. It's privileged and confidential information that if I
As a member
share-
of the board,
that
I'm sure I can
If I
see it.
share with the board, now it could be construed as right-to-know language versus I chose to take an email that was marked privileged and confidential and to share it with one member of the board chair, to say, am I misreading this? Do you see something in this language that I'm not construing? And Heidi can speak for herself about her opinion on that, but
It was short and sweet and very clearly states what Mrs. Riley's position is through council.
and so regardless of what somebody says they overheard or somebody says they talked about, we have a legal counsel representing Mrs. Riley who has said point blank, this is what my client wants. I don't know that we do anything other than that. That is the front door, that is the direct communication. Anything else is back door and back channel and not really subject to what we should be talking about, in my opinion.
I just really find it disingenuous that anyone is going to sit here and say that they don't think the purchase and sale and the warrant article match up suddenly, and even worse, that they feel like the warrant article, that the sale wasn't based on, I remember reading on Facebook comments from people in your family saying 2 bites at the apple, there's 2 bites at the apple before we let
Because
go of this money.
that's what the school board presented.
And that's exactly.
But that's not what the warrant article, that's not what this says.
That
The
was,
school district attorney would disagree.
Okay.
and does disagree.
Okay.
That's why we have
And what does
counsel.
Mrs. Riley
And
attorney,
that's,
what does
if I
Mrs.
recall, I
Riley's
don't have it
attorney
in front of
say?
me, it's section 21.
25.
25.
Of the purchase and sales.
Correct.
And with the, I'll call it contingencies,
Correct.
right, as a part of that document.
And that is what the warrant was drafted on, based off of by our attorneys. And so again, to suddenly hear, I was under the impression, based off of our 5-0-0 vote, that all 5 of us are in favor of building a new school on the Riley land.
That vote was to put it on the ballot as that property. And I also didn't have this information at that time.
That information was public
Okay,
December.
great. There's a lot of public information that I don't read. I don't remember reading the entire document. I think I read the warrant article a number of times. But this was the section 7 that has a date, a hard date of July 14th, 2023 for her to be paid. My supposition is, and because you won't share, is that at that point, somebody came to you and said, she deserves her money. And now what it looks like, we're trying to get an end around this. And there was, and I didn't have, I had a problem with the warrant article.
Nobody's getting
initially.
around though, Peter, just to be clear. So what, the problem that I see with this is that people are reading Article 7
Alone.
as a standalone.
Correct.
And they're not reading the entire agreement, and 25 clarifies 7 in ways that our attorney has advised us puts us exactly what we did. So, you can't just read one section of the
No, I read both.
purchase and sales. There's more to it.
I read the whole thing.
Just pulling
couple
this back
times
into
now.
the agenda, right? So, again, we have a draft warrant article. The board can come in and make whatever comments or potential edits we'd like to this draft warrant article. I think we're encouraged to do so. And that's the immediate next step, right? So if there is specific language that board members would like to see, now's a great time to do that.
I picked up on a word while I was reading all of the correspondence, and I stay quiet. At no time did any of us demand anything. It
Or
said
say
we
that she
demanded
demanded.
information. We never demanded anything from Mrs. Riley. We were all very, I
Or
don't,
did we say she demanded anything from us?
No.
I just don't want her to
7
think.
of this board, and I think the message this board wants to send is we're very grateful,
Oh, absolutely.
right?
Thankful.
And,
I
yeah.
hope she understands that, but that's something between her and her lawyer. I don't wanna get involved and sway, I don't even know who she is. I don't think any of us do.
I mean, I
Can,
think,
can we just clarify that point? I've never met Mrs. Riley. I've never had direct communication with Mrs. Riley. All the communication has been through our attorney and Mrs. Riley's attorney. And also, Mr. Charbonneau has been an intermediary. We approached Mr. Charbonneau to ask about opportunities that might exist in town. And so he has also been an intermediary. But again, we still go through the front door with the attorney.
To me, having Rick Charbonneau and an attorney, they're watching out for her interests, and our lawyer is watching out for our interests. And
Correct.
again, there wasn't
Not a
any
lawyer.
dispute that we all understood that no money was going to change hands until the school was approved, because a contingency is having a school on the property.
And I do believe that at deliberative, when there were a few speakers who spoke about, and if the school never gets approved, there are other opportunities once the town owns the land, those comments sent flags up the pole that had people go, well, wait a second, that's not what Mrs. Riley wants. Her intent to me has been crystal clear from the beginning. A school across from the fire station named after her daughter Robin. That's what she wants. And we have an obligation to follow through on that based on the terms of the agreement. And so when people started suggesting alternative ways to do other things, that was problematic to me, because that was never in my imagination of why we were entering into this conversation.
And people approaching apparently, through the grapevine, approaching Mrs. Riley with different offers and suggestions from town, which is completely inappropriate, to try to steal land from the school for a different committee.
I don't think that that's happening, one. Okay?
That's what.
Two, I don't know Mrs. Riley either. I've met her daughter a couple times. They used to run when DeRoche stopped running the blueberries. They did the blueberry farm for a couple of years, I think, and, but other than that, I don't know Mrs. Riley. There was conversation at deliberative about the whole 2029 thing. And I think I asked the question, or maybe my wife asked the question, what happens if it doesn't sell in 2 years? We'd have to go back to, it doesn't pass within the 2-year window. We'd have to either renegotiate
Yeah.
with Mrs. Riley.
Yep.
Because the purchase and sale says it becomes null and void.
Correct. Yep.
And those reasons for extensions are outlined here, right? If all the money isn't approved in the first 2023, or some of the other contingencies, I think the environmental piece, right, which I believe is already done, so I think
All right, so we have our.
that ties back to 7. So I do think there needs to be changes. I think it needs to be very specific on,
The article.
one, what Mrs. Riley's.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So if
thing
you'd
will
like to
be-
send suggestions for what you
Yeah.
think the language should be, definitely feel free to do that, and that's something that we can look at and we can discuss amongst ourselves and share with legal counsel to get their opinion on what should be included and what should not. Is there anything else on the land purchase? All right, NHSBA Delegate Assembly.
So,
What do you like?
Peter volunteered to be the delegate, correct?
For economic.
Oh, good, my finger on my nose
not it.
translated all the way through the
Wait,
screen when
I
I was
may be
remote.
wrong. Did you volunteer last time, or did you?
For the economic development thing?
Oh, yeah.
This is the NHSBA Delegate Assembly.
No, I didn't volunteer for that.
Okay, I think
You
it-
almost just
I'm mixing-
know.
I think the only thing I said about that was our amendments, or whatever they're called there,
Yeah.
were due the day we got that
Yes,
email.
that is
Yes.
correct, you did
That
say
was-
that, yeah.
And I'll go back to the videotape on that one if I have to. I certainly did not volunteer for that.
I'll stand corrected, but then we need a delegate. We need somebody on Saturday, October
So
14th.
I have, Soph has a cheer competition that day, so I cannot do it unless the timing of the competition's in the afternoon, and I won't know that until the week
Oh,
of.
okay.
How long is it, Jamie?
It's like 2 or 3 hours, usually in the morning. I can probably go. We're planning a build day that day, but I can go if you can't.
Maybe we
or
can be, I'm
yeah.
happy to, I just won't know when the timing of her performing is at the comp. And so,
Wedding.
So I'm writing down Tina/Heidi, because we need,
Rick, we'll coordinate as it gets closer.
Yeah.
we have to
Okay.
sign somebody up, right? Or do you
okay.
sign yourself up? I can't remember the,
Yeah. Do you want to just sign me up?
Sign her up.
Sign me
Okay,
up.
so-
I'll do it again.
perfect. Thank you for that, and then
14th.
there will be more resolution information coming out, so.
I'm just gonna put it in now.
All right, and then sliding into the question that we brought down from our committee reports, the budget committee questions from June 27th. So I'm turning it over to you, Andrew.
June 22nd, right?
It says 7th, but I will go with 2nd. I'm
All right.
changing it now.
Thank you. Yeah, so again, 4 questions coming out of the June 22nd meeting with the Budget Committee that we're still tracking. I know the Budget Committee is picking up their meeting frequencies again now that we're back in August, and just looking for some support. There was a question here from Mrs. Douglas on the solar economics. And I know we've had some conversation about it, but looking forward to just sharing that formal response to the Budget Committee.
So I don't know that we have a full economic impact to share. Let me give you a solar update. So we learned last Wednesday that the arrays and the racking have arrived in the warehouse with our name on them. So that's a huge step. The stuff's in hand. Kay has submitted the intergrid tie paperwork with Eversource, so we're waiting for that to be signed off on. And there have been some submissions to the fire department and the building inspector, I believe. So permitting is in process, is what I understand. At this point, the battery capacitor system is being separated off from the solar array. So we're sort of looking at the solar mobilization in 2 stages. It's got the solar on and connected, and it'll start to power the building, but we won't have the battery buffering for peak demand time until the battery is built and approved. So we assured the fire department and the building inspector that we wouldn't do the array until it was permitted, but we want to get that permit established, and then we'll do the batteries as a secondary permit later on in the school year. So all of that is plugging ahead. There's also ongoing communication with Dynamic Grid relative to exactly when the PPA begins. And we believe it's going to begin when the solar is turned on, and that we're not going to have to wait for substantial completion with the batteries. So that's a game changer in the economic analysis, because we just don't know at this point. But if we can settle on that agreement, then we can plug ahead faster with the solar.
So, I mean, putting that aside, right, I think the initial vision was to have solar on and operable last year.
Correct.
Right, so I think the question from the budget committee, looking at the financials, is now that we've waited from last year to what was presented to the voters to now, like, how much more is this project costing us because of that delay, and we didn't get the return that was presented to the voters at the time that the voters approved the article, right? That, the delta is what they're looking for.
Yep. We'll go back to that and take a look. There was also, there were other cost avoidances that we just need to nail down exactly where it lands. So, for example, we had oil in the ground until this year. So we'll get back to you on that.
Yep. Second question was the revenue for the $222,000 that I know we talked about. So just maybe a sentence or two on that so we can respond is great. Number 3 was Mr. Bork requested the number of positions unfilled and what the dollar amount was in the actual budget. So out of FY23, all the positions that were unfilled, what's that total dollar amount that remained unfilled from the budget?
So Holly did reply to an email regarding that back in June. And I don't think she assigned a dollar value to it, but she had these are the positions that have been unfilled throughout the year. So, but you're looking for an actual dollar associated with that?
Yes. That was the question.
Yeah.
Is that something that budget committee can calculate on their own, knowing what the positions are, and then, I don't know how that typically works, do we do that math?
Well,
When
so
there are questions like
It's a
this?
simple report, right? Look at the unfilled positions, so we know what they are, and look at the dollar amounts that were in the budget associated to it.
Well, so that's the simple one.
And
Like a
benefits.
position that was unfilled all year. I mean, that we can do the math on, but then you also had positions that
Partials.
started filled and then became vacant. In a few cases, we had vacancies that were filled, so,
I think the question, the spirit of the question was the number that were unfilled. Not, we had a position and then filled it with somebody at a different salary.
unfilled all year.
Unfilled.
Okay, so Holly's email addresses that, and we'll ask for a dollar amount to assign to it. I would hope, too, that reporting to them the 442 would be, I mean, because a chunk of that, a good chunk of that, we can attribute back to that, but it's not exact.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, plus the encumbrances, right?
Right, some of that we spent, right? We spent
Yeah, absolutely.
$800,000 of that.
Fourth question was, I know last year, last school year, we had a conversation about buses and how our buses weren't running optimally. There was some consolidation of buses due to shortages of drivers or whatever it might be. And there was a question about rebates from First Student as a result of that company not fulfilling their contract and providing the services that they should have.
So that kind of falls under that liquidated damages part of the contract. And in order to have damages, you have to prove that, really prove that something didn't happen. So the goal of the busing company is to get all our students who want to take the bus home. So they did that, they just did it in a different way. So instead of being on your own bus, you might have been consolidated onto 2 or within 3 buses or whatnot. So yes, kids got home later, but everyone that wanted to take a bus home was able to take a bus home. Everyone that wanted to take a bus to school was able to take a bus to school. So it wouldn't rise to that level. So what some bus companies do is they say, all right, you have 8 routes going. We only have buses for 6. We're doing those 6. Those other 2 bus routes, people have to find their own way to and from school. That's not what this bus company does, so they kind of protect themselves by ensuring that they're getting everyone to school and everyone home.
But in our calculations, we have a calculation of daily value per bus, 300 and, I don't know, I'm gonna call it $80 per bus, whatever it is. It's close to, it's in that ballpark, right? And if a bus isn't operating, do we still pay that $380
We
per
do.
day? And that's the issue, right? Is we're calculating a per day rate per bus, and if we're not getting the buses, why are we paying that per day?
So I think it's, again, if I understand it correctly, it's a differential in the contract. So you're paying based upon 10 buses at 380. That calculates what you pay, right? But to collect damages against it, they have to have failed to do the primary thing, which is get everybody to school and back home again. So they have the flexibility within that overall daily rate to take an alternative way to make that happen. And so that's the conflict. It's not crystal clear that if the bus doesn't run, you save 380. That's not the way we read the contract and understand it. So it's not, maybe we need to pay attention to that the next time we negotiate, but, you know, there were other things in there like during COVID, you know, we had very advantageous language that saved us a lot of money that other districts didn't have relative to worldwide events like pandemics. We were one of the only districts with pandemic language in there, so so we just have to remember it is a two-way street, because we were able to look at them and say, we're not paying for that. So, but in this case, you know, their argument would be every child in Litchfield who wanted to ride a bus got to school and got home, and we were able to do that.
All right, thank you.
Any other budget committee type questions? Those were the four.
Those are the four.
All right, moving on to new business. Policy updates, policy JBAA, sexual harassment policy. This was brought forward to the policy committee today. This was reviewed by and drafted by legal counsel. So the feeling of the policy committee, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the attorneys are in the best position to craft the language.
Yeah.
So we approved bringing it forward for tonight, and we're in agreement with the recommended language from the attorneys.
Yeah, and this is one that the coding of the policy is also changing. I think during some of the policy committee work that we highlighted in June, there's gonna be a number of policies over probably a long period of time that will be put forth in front of this board for approvals because of code changes, name changes, whatever it might be. This was a high priority policy that needed to get reviewed. Legal team has done that, and as a result, it's being presented to the board tonight.
Can everyone see the red line version?
Yeah.
Was able to take a look at it? Yep. Are there any questions?
No.
So this would be for first approval. I'll make a motion to approve, and now it's no longer gonna be called JBAA, it's gonna be ACAC.
How appropriate for the effort that Andrew's leading us on.
I was gonna say,
First
I
read-
kinda like it.
The
Yeah.
first three-lettered policy is ACAC.
It's true. All right.
This
So-
is not ACDC.
Motion to approve ACAC
That's harassment.
as a first reading.
I'll second.
All right. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving policy ACAC for first reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? 500. Moving into assessment reports, our entertainment for the night.
So actually, while Mary comes up to get set up, no, where is the remote? Let's get it on so that folks can follow along at home. So this is the annual, this is actually required by policy, that we come in and give an update on the district status relative to student performance. Remember, the great majority of this is based upon student test scores on the New Hampshire SAS or the SAT, but the principals also have some other measures that they're gonna share with you tonight. And so we'll work our way through it and make sure everybody understands what we have. So Mary will do an overview, and then we will go school by school with Dan leading the pack, and we'll work our way up to the high school. So, here it is, Mary.
All right,
gonna hit-
excellent, because my computer is not turning on right now.
Let me hit
Excellent.
slideshow, and
Yeah.
you just do the old-fashioned beep or whatever, and I'll move you. All right?
Excellent.
Hey, Oscar, can we definitely confirm this is being projected? Perfect, thank you.
All right, so as I give every year, it's just a little overview of where our state testing is at. Sorry. We do SAS reading and math through grades 3 through 8. 11th grade does SATs. And then SAS science is done in grades 5th, 8th, and 11th. Why do we look at this data as a district? It helps us to identify the learning gaps. It really helps us to identify the kids that are on the bubble between either not achieving or just like starting to get to the right grade level. And it continues to give us insight into our curriculum progression and allow us to make modifications as appropriate. It helps us to ensure that our current classroom assessment models include the same kind of language and rigor that we would expect from the state testing. So what you're looking at here is the overall test performance, grades 3 through 8 in ELA for this current year. So this is our 2023 data. We're looking at 55% of our kids are at or above grade level in ELA in grades 3 through 8. In math, we are looking at 39% of our kids are at or above grade level. That's clearly something that we need to continue to work on. And then in science, which is always our lowest, not just ours, statewide, it's the lowest performing test. We are looking at 31% of our kids are at or above grade level in grades 5, 8, and 11. So what I added this year was to look at the comparison of the last 3 years. I chose to do the last 3 years because the 2020 test was during COVID, and that's when we had, we took it in the fall, and we had some issues with doing the wrong tests and so on and so forth. So as you can see, if we look at our 3-year comparison for ELA, we went from 54% proficient in 2021 to 50% in 2022, and then back up to 55% in 2023. So we are above where we were in 2021. We're making growth. We need to find ways to make bigger growth, but we are headed in the right direction. Math is very similar. We are looking at 37% in 2021, 37% in 2022, and 39% in 2023. So again, we are headed in the right direction. We need to continue to make additional growth.
What's normal? What was state, like state, what's the state
State,
benchmark?
we are right at, or depending on the grade level, and again, we don't have the comparison for this year. Doesn't come out until the fall. But typically we are right around the state average. So either a little bit above or a little bit below, depending on the grade level.
I mean, you're saying, you know, we're on the right track, and sure, you know,
Oh,
a point better, you know.
I'm not saying we're on the right track. I said we're getting,
We're getting-
better. We're getting better.
Getting
I
better.
mean, that's...
by 1 point.
I will take 1 point. When you look at the state numbers, they are not significantly different from what we are seeing.
So I find that very interesting, because this is a statewide assessment about who's at grade level,
Correct.
right? So in theory, you want all of your students to be at grade level, and you'll have some that are not.
Right.
But the fact that statewide, you know, if their percentages are like ours, half of the students are not proficient at grade level, it kind of raises a red flag to me.
Of
with
course
the
it does.
assessment. I mean,
Of course it does.
we're continuing to measure.
We're measuring against a test that, as a state, we are performing below average.
Right.
And I don't know as a state what we are doing to get ourselves up there. I know what we're doing as a district to try and move the needle,
Yeah.
but as a state,
Yeah.
and, sorry, go ahead.
Do I look at this like, red is, needs help, yellow is approaching grade level, green is at grade level, and
Blue is above.
mastered or
Right,
above?
right, correct.
Now, I may have seen the math test for the 8th grade, and I did notice there was a lot of word problems. And if your students aren't performing well in English and aren't reading at grade level, how do we expect them to do well on the math test?
It's a
that
huge-
uses very specific language that math departments across the street now have to start teaching because the state decided to use this in a test.
It's a huge, there's a huge correlation between
Word
that.
problems.
And that is part of every year when we look at this data, and you'll hear it from the principals, we look into what are the areas that people need that we've scored the lowest on, what are the types of questions that we've scored the lowest on.
And they're like 4 steps. It isn't like answer one question, and if you get the first one wrong, then you get the second one wrong.
Correct.
And it's, the kids just give up. It's like banging your head against a wall for some of these kids. It's painful to watch.
And part of this is looking at building more of these multi-step type of questions into what we are doing on the daily basis. And, you know, I know that a lot of that reaction is, oh my God, we're teaching to the test. But it's not teaching to the test, it's teaching kids how to process through those kinds of questions. And
Higher order level of thinking.
Correct.
Critical thinking.
correct.
And Liz, to expand on that a little bit, because you referenced math, the same argument is science. So when you're looking at those science
Correct.
scores, and one of the things about the science SAS, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mary, but there are multiple questions dealing with one phenomena. So if you don't understand what you read about the phenomena, now the multiple questions will be a
Correct.
challenge for you. Versus math, they're more independent, standalone questions. So
And-
A lot of word problems.
And that's, I would say that for science SAS. I would also say that for the SAT. Like, when we look at our SAT scores, which aren't included in this, the majority of our ELA scores are about, are readings based in history or based in science. And if our kids don't have the vocab appropriate or the types of questioning appropriate for it, and we rely on, the honest truth is, most of our ELA teachers are the ones that are prepping our kids for this, and it needs to be across the board. We need to be prepping them for that kind of advanced science questioning and that kind of advanced social studies questioning as well. So you can see the same level of comparison for science. We went from 31 to 33, back down to 31 this last year. That has always been our weakest area, not just us, but across the state. Science is the weakest area in the SAS in general. So, that's clearly an area we need to focus on in terms of making sure that we are prepping the kids for the kinds of questions that they're going to see on these tests.
That's a tricky thing when they only get it in 5th, 8th, and 11th. You know, I feel like kids who, if you look at cohorts, certainly, you know, if a kid is in 4th grade or third grade seeing this SAS for the first
Right.
time, their scores are going to improve over hopefully improve over time, because they're going to recognize how to take that test.
Right, the kinds of questions, the things that are expected of them. But
But
when
if
you
you're
only
taking
do
it
it,
once every 3 years,
It's a
And we're not back, you know, if we're not backing that up in
correct.
between.
Correct. And unlike the other areas with testing with math and ELA, we do it every year. Science is not. I mean, we test it in the content areas, but we are not testing it in as a school level test across the board. So that is the general overview of our
And I'm
testing.
assuming when we get into the school reports, we'll start to balance this between, all right, why do we have so many kids
Correct.
in honor roll and doing very well, which is great to see, but how am I balancing this with the
Correct.
sports? Okay.
Yep.
All right, we'll invite Principal Mitchell up to talk with us about Griffin's results. And you what? You want me to do it, or do you want to drive?
Doesn't matter to me.
I'm already connected, how's that?
Okay. I brought my little pointer too. Is it reading
Look on
it?
the TV? I don't think so.
It doesn't go through the TV. That's
doesn't
weird.
work
it
on
shows up on the wall, but doesn't. All right.
TV
Apparently that-
rejects your
I-
pointer.
I see it,
Do you?
yeah.
Yep.
The people at home don't see it, though.
I don't see it at all.
I see nothing.
There it is. That's all right.
It's on the wall, but watch what happens when it goes into the TV.
Yeah, it's right there.
It's just less.
It's the angle, it's like,
I don't see it at
When
all.
it gets above the top third, you can't see it.
I don't know. Forget that.
Good idea.
One
All
less
right.
prop.
All right.
ready?
Yep. So very similar to last year, I just wanted to introduce, basically how we use these, because what I'm going to present tonight are basically two assessments. The SAS, which they take once a year, and we get one kind of, they jump at the end of the year, and it's kind of a, how'd you do? And the other one that we'll get to later in the presentation is on the iReady. The iReady we get 3 times a year, and while it may seem similar, we're getting 2 different types of results, and it's important to just know that we use them differently. So we can just go to the next one. Oh, as a reminder, within the PLC model and kind of our everyday thinking, this is how we're making our decisions based on data, but I'm saying data here because that's basically the numbers and the results. But we're also looking for teacher observation and basically what the students are telling us every day. So now we can go in. So just to show you, this is our overall math performance. I don't have the whole district, but you just kind of have to remember what Mary had. And you go to the next one, you can see how it compares to 3 and 4. And one thing that has come out, we're going to dig a little bit deeper as we go through the presentation, is one thing that we have noticed is that we have a drop off from 3 to 4.
Big time.
It's important to know, though, and anyone who creates SAS or anyone who Cambion will tell you that this is a measure of progression towards proficiency. And so I always have to check myself to make sure that I don't say, this is a 4th grade problem. So what it's telling us is that we are prepared at 3rd grade, but then something happens at 4th grade where there's a fall off. But while it's just given to 3rd and 4th graders, it should be measuring proficiency that is started all the way back in kindergarten. So there's an element of this that we have to look at whole school to prepare and to make sure that that level of preparation then continues, and so there's not a drop off. Go to the next slide, please. Just to show you where we compare year to year. So this is all about performance. This is not about cohort, because
Right.
we have them in 3rd grade and then it's 4th grade. And so you basically, how we did last year, how we did this year, you actually show more than 1 point of growth. In the proficiency area, you're looking at quick math, 5 points of growth.
I like the lesser red number too.
Yes, lesser red. But now if you go to the next slide, this is where we get into that cohort. And this is what happens when you look at that cohort. So this is where we lessened that red. So we got those 1s to 2s, but as we've always talked about, the low-hanging fruit, those fringe kids, and we always, when we look at the student list, we always look at those. Again, that's only information that the 4th grade can use because we have the 3rd grade, but we always want to look at those kids that I say are 5 points below, and 5 points above. Because what we don't want to do is trade one for the other and end up with the same thing. But those are the ones that we want to make sure, with just a little bit of push, we can get them into green or proficiency. But at the same point, we really need to pay attention to those ones that we are barely there to make sure that they grow. So next slide, please. This is just our ELA overall performance. And then the breakdown. You have to read this one opposite. I have no idea why, but just so you know, to design these slides, the only way you can get the data is you actually have to, all these little things are screenshots. You have to screenshot and then copy and paste them. For some reason, ELA shows up 4 stacked on 3, and math shows up 3 stacked on 4. But anyway, that's how it breaks down there.
There too.
What was that?
Seems to be a bit of a drop.
There's a bit of a drop there too.
Can I ask just one quick question?
Yeah.
What time of year do you take these tests?
So the SAS test is taken later on in the year. The window opens mid-March and goes all the way to the beginning of June. As a team, we've determined that we want to take them as late as possible so we can get as much instruction. The designers will tell you it doesn't matter because, again, this is a progressive towards proficiency. But at the same point, we try to find that sweet spot where it's late enough in the year so you have instruction, but not too late in the year, because when the weather's nice and they want to be outside is also not the great time to give it. So we're giving it just on the backside of April vacation. That mid-May time is when we're giving the assessments.
But it's the same time every year, so there isn't one year where you did it in
No.
September and the next year you did it.
Yeah, and we've looked at, I mean, not actually but at other schools we kind of toyed around with, like, let's get it out of the way in March and let's do it in May, and we actually didn't see too much of a discernible difference. But it is in that window, which is a big window.
When do you do your iReady testing?
iReady-
Because we have fall, winter, and spring so there's not test fatigue.
Yeah, so
They're taking these SAS tests and then an iReady test. They're both spring tests.
yeah, so there's a break. That I would say that they take both of them within a 4 to 5 week. Then just grade 3
Yeah,
and 4.
that's-
We buffer them. So
Okay.
oftentimes, or at least this past year, while the 3rd and 4th grade were taking the SAS, some of the lower grades were already working on the iReady. 3rd and 4th took the iReady a little bit later. Again, iReady is a big window.
And they've already know what it's all about by the spring.
Yeah. We went to the next one, which should be overall performance year to year. Again, last year to this year, we're showing modest growth in that area from 46, but at least in this past year, we're up over 50% in proficiency.
Are those the kids that go to reading intervention, your yellows? Or what do we have Title I? What do we have?
So we have Title I and reading
Oh, that's
intervention.
SAS, sorry.
No, this is
My
SAS.
mistake.
Yeah, we're still in SAS.
Dan, you said modest growth. Let me just point out, you grew blue, you grew green, you drastically reduced red. That's like, if you're trying to put your attention somewhere, that's like what you really want to do.
that's 10 points of
Shrink
growth.
red and increase green and blue, because that shows that happening across the board, right? So that modest, but a lot of positives in there.
Yes. But again, we see not as drastic as in math, but you do see an increase in green, a decrease in blue,
This
a
is ELA.
decrease in yellow, which could be good if it resulted in an increase in green,
Yeah.
but we saw an increase in red.
Right.
So at first glance, but then when you dig into the numbers, it's a little bit of growth. But what happened is that I think we lost some fringe kids in the wrong.
So these,
Direction.
just to be clear, these are the same kiddos.
Yes. So that's
So that's
this
what
is
they
this
took
is a
in grade
cohort. Yep.
3.
When
and
they're in
then
grade 3, that's how they performed. When they're in grade
grade
4,
4,
that's how they performed.
Okay.
So we grew some green, but unfortunately, when you look at that, I think we grew our green by losing blue.
Blue. Yeah.
So it's a negative trend
Yeah.
overall. All right, next slide. Okay, so here's the key, and I would like if you could click on the data breakdown. And I apologize, you're going to learn something about me right now, which is that when I use spreadsheets, I make spreadsheets that make perfect sense to me. And 0 sense to anyone else. But what I wanted to do...
Did you see what I did to your class size spreadsheet?
No.
Oh, wait till we get there.
Okay. I make great spreadsheets for my own reference. So
I had a lot of questions on
yeah,
this.
yeah. Now I had a lot of information, so what I needed to do was kind of break it down. And so this first one, I wanted to break down. So when we say ELA, I want to start to get to the target information of, again, trying to identify that low-hanging fruit, and where is it that we can get the bang for the buck. So where are we historically performing? So you can just kind of take a general peek at it, but this is more just the raw data.
What are your level 1, 2, 3? What does that mean?
The 1, 2, 3, 4, those are the proficiency levels.
Mike, is this in
So
the
red,
PDF
yellow,
or
blue,
is it
green.
Another document.
Okay. This is the number of.
It's a hyperlink in the document.
A link in there.
Oh, in there, okay.
Yeah, on the key takeaways sheet, there's I think it's yellow. That
Yes.
indicates the hyperlink.
This slide, Peter, that yellow
Data breakdown.
link at the top, data breakdown, brings you to the spreadsheet.
So the numbers in the first column, under the ELA column,
Yeah.
those are student number, the numbers of students who
Hold
placed
on, I
in
need to
those.
follow. Those are the percentages.
So 17, 28, 28, 28
That's percentages.
percentages.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, this is Mary's stuff. Isn't this Mary's?
So this is actually less. If you go to the year-to-year change, the second tab,
Yeah.
Yep.
this is where we get into some of the comparative data. So just focusing less on the numbers and more on the colors. Green means increase, red means decrease. And I tried to gradiate the colors, but then the red gets just way too dark. And so year to year, this is why I wanted to show this picture. So how one third grade and another third grade performed. So that's just about performance. And then how one grade, last year's grade 4, and this year's grade 4. And so what you end up is with a lot of green. So that says overall what they're doing is having some success. But when you use the same kids and the impact that it's having on the students, if you can go to the next tab, the grade 3, 4 vertical tab, now when you compare it. So even though this year's grade 4 performed better than last year's grade 4, what it shows is that this year's grade 4, there's a lot of red based on how they compared as a third grade. And so I did this more to show, and this is where we're going to work in the PLCs with the teachers to kind of say, here's where we missed, here's where, and you can scroll all the way across.
Oh, hang on.
That's way too far across.
Sorry. No. All the way across.
We're seeing a lot of red in writing. Now, I will tell you, and I think I can share this, that the state has reached out to us. The state, we got a memo from the state that basically said they've received a lot of feedback on the writing and the scoring of the writing and the writing assessment. And so this year they're actually doing writing different.
Who scores the writing?
That's the thing. It's AI score. So in an attempt to review that and to go to what they're going to do this year is I believe they're going all hand score. All paper, all hand scored. So that means this year we will administer the SAS writing separate from the SAS ELA and math in a very tight window early, like March 2nd to 17th. Everyone's going to take the writing. It'll be hand scored. The state has come and said, we've got enough feedback. There seems to be enough issues. We need to do kind of a reset and a review. So we'll see that. In the meantime, it is enough that we can look at this and say something's not working in writing or it's not translating from grade 3 to grade 4. Again, you look at math, it shows you, all right, operations and algebraic thinking, it's all great. And like, we're hitting the mark there. That is actually, what we're doing there seems to be working. But modeling and problem solving, numbers, operations, base 10s, and fractions. And again, it's not about the day-to-day work, but really about the alignment, because this is a measure of proficiency based on the state standards. What we have is we have standards-based instruction, and we have programs, but really, is it aligning the right way? So for instance, we spend an awful lot of time on, say, multiplication and division, But if this assessment is heavy on fractions, where fractions based on our program, based on what we do, doesn't come in till later in the year, the exposure isn't just there. So that's a learning thing that we can take and say, what are we doing in our day-to-day to get the best impact and to align them to lead the students to success. These are the conversations that we're having. It's not about blaming, but really about learning from the information that's being told here. And then you just have your general overall proficiency comparisons. This is the 3-year. I didn't put an asterisk, but this 2021, that was the year where that's the spring data of 21. The same kids took the same test in the fall of 20, and then we gave it to them again in the spring of 21. And that's how it kind of worked. But at the same point, it is data, it was information, so I felt the need to at least include it, and so you could kind of see.
Dan, just make sure, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. The intent here, because this is a much deeper dive into it, but you're taking this to the PLCs and the teachers are looking at
this is. So I want the conversation with SAS, is we can look at performance, but most impactfully is that we can look at trends. And so it's not about what you did last year with those kids, but more importantly about how we're doing programmatically and systematically. Where are we hitting our points and where are we missing the mark, so that we can make those more systematic changes to what we're doing, as well as we can dig into the student data and kind of say, I said, it's important to find those fringe kids because they need the little extra attention. But at the same point, this is a powerful tool to look at our systems and our structures. And so that's why this data is here, just to kind of, there's information and there's knowledge and trends that we can't necessarily ignore.
And if you're conducting the orchestra, you need to say more of this and less of that at times, right?
Yeah.
So this is a more cowbell moment where, like, here's what we got to focus on. This is what the data leads us to.
And so to come back from that, those are the kind of the 4 main points that I kind of discovered by building those spreadsheets, by looking at it, is really what you see is year to year some growth, year to year some declines. There are year to year there's some growth. That's that 3 to 3, 4 to 4. Seems to be generally there was a lot of green on that one. When you looked at the vertical, we're seeing some in the negative fashion. Math is generally more consistent. Even with those reds and greens, you're not seeing those big swings. If you look at the numbers, if you go back to the vertical and even the performance, when you look at like the swings in writing, you're talking about swings of like 20% or 17%. Math, the greens and the reds, they're all kind of in the 5% this way, 5% that way. So we tend to generally have a more consistent. And then writing, as you said, it's always. But while we are still going to look at it systematically, we also know that the state is also looking at it. So we're going to see how that kind of all plays out.
It'll be interesting to see if the paper test makes a difference for these kids.
I know that the initial conversations, because
Originally it was a paper test.
Yeah, but I mean this year with the SAS is they do the students do the assessments and teachers are getting results pretty quickly. And they were saying some of these writing scores just don't make sense. There are a lot of kids that seem to be overperforming. There are a lot of kids that seem to be underperforming. We can't make any sense like this student's writing score does not match in either direction what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. So there was some stuff. So I am while I don't like the shortened window earlier in the year, I'm excited about some action being taken on that assessment, because if anything, we have it, we do it, we might as well do something with it, and it helps when it's even more meaningful, reliable for us.
I see it at work.
So now we'll dig into the iReady results. Again, just a brief history of the iReady. iReady is administered 3 times a year, and then we also have the system, the pathway system, so that it can be used consistently throughout the year. Those 3 are called the benchmark assessments, but then also based on the benchmark assessments, students can give personalized growth pathways. So they do individual activities throughout there, and those are supposed to generally lead to growth. Jen and I have we've attended 3?
Yes.
3 meetings this summer with the iReady team, and we put together a PD plan this year for our teachers. At least at GMS, we're going to have a core team, and then opportunities for the whole staff to really utilize this tool and to make it beneficial. So if we go into the results, and I will say before we even go into this, we had a meeting yesterday.
Yes.
Jen, thank you. Jen remembers my calendar. Yesterday, we met with the iReady team, and we asked explicitly, help us to explain performance on iReady versus performance on SAS and how they don't match up. And they said, we're not quite sure, but we're actually going to start a study on that. Would you be interested? And so we kind of got everyone looped in. We need to know the specifics, but we may not, as Litchfield, be part of that study, but at least iReady is kind of on that to kind of do that parallel to kind of align SAS performance with iReady performance. But what I can tell you is that whereas SAS is a measure of proficiency against a standard, iReady is more concerned about growth against grade level. And that grade level is just norm different. It's based on their own norms. And so,
And just if I can
Yeah.
interrupt, the only reason that study may not work for us is because of our numbers. They need a
Yeah.
Larger
sample
group.
size of 100
Yeah.
in order to be able to do the comparative work. So we are working with them right now to see whether or not they can work with a smaller sample size.
yeah, I said, would you be interested? And I said, would be interested in learning more. So,
Yeah.
so just to show you the darker bars are based on the spring assessments, and the lighter bars below it are based on the beginning, that fall benchmark, which is done within the first couple of weeks of school. It's a true benchmark of where we get these kids. And so, again, you're seeing general and positive growth with the green dashed line being where we want most of our kids, which is mid or above grade level, early on grade level. We want more green and then less red. And so this is, the top one was where we were, what I presented to you last year, and then the bottom section is where we were this year. Again, showing positive growth.
Big growth. Yeah.
Go to the next one. Again, to compare with SAS, this is where we can do some cross things. Are iReady and SAS both telling us that there are certain sub areas or certain topics that we are missing the mark or we're strengthening in, because we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but what we want to do is say, okay, now we have 2 major points of data that says we're missing the mark on measurement and data. They may use different kind of words, but they kind of all lead to the same thing. So again, it's trying to figure out trends and patterns. All right, this is where it gets a little loopy. So you see numbers that you're like, what? And again, yesterday at the training, I said, all right, I'm going to tell you what I think it is, and this is what I'm going to say it, and you can tell me if I'm right. And I got done talking, and she said, no. So she clarified for me.
I'll jump in if you go on. Go ahead.
So one bar doesn't lead to the next bar, okay? So the first column where you see numbers that are well over 100%, that is based on the progress median. Now let me explain that to you, and if you don't get it, it's okay. It took me all summer, and I even had it wrong yesterday. So I'll use an example. So if in grade 2, they wanted a child for typical growth, typical progress was to gain 6 points. If that student gained 8 points, that's considered 120% of the growth. That 100 is the median number. And the reason why it's median number is not everyone in the grade level has the same amount of growth because it's student specific. So for instance, if a student in the fall takes the assessment and is at or above grade level, then their typical progress is going to be, let's say, 2 or 3 points. If a student comes in 2 or more grade levels below, their typical progress is going to be 12 points because they want to catch them up. but what those over 100 is the median number. So more kids in equal number of kids in each grade made more than 106% of their typical growth, and the same amount of students made less than 106% of their typical growth. And then the next one, where you have the numbers below 100%, those are that's the percentage of students. So now we're not talking about a growth number. This is actually counting heads and noses that made their stretch growth. So you get your typical growth. We want you to make 4 points. Stretch growth, we'd love to see you make 7. And that's how that breaks down.
So what is stretch growth?
Stretch growth, again, is that you have your typical growth,
Yep.
and then we're going to say, but let's see if we could push it. So your typical growth is 4 points. You make 7. In that first column, you're going to show up as 130%.
Okay.
And you're also going to show up as a percentage of making your stretch growth.
Dan, can I chime in also?
Yep.
So for the stretch
Did I get it
growth,
right?
it's closing more than 1 year at a time.
Yeah.
So the typical growth would be you start early 6th grade, or early 2nd grade in Dan's example, and they expect you to be at the end of 2nd grade by the end of 2nd grade. That's 1 year's growth.
Yep.
The stretch growth is saying, okay, a kid comes into 2nd grade and they're performing at early 1st grade. We want them to close that full gap. So
And
the
make
stretch,
progress,
they want to
right.
be on end of grade 2 by the end of grade 2.
Right.
And that's the target towards that stretch growth of getting to where they need to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now,
That makes
obviously, I told you that this is a screenshot. Just so you know what I see live on my platform is, I could then click on grade K, okay? And then what it's going to do is it's going to break down into those 5 the above grade level, at or on, those 5 colors, and then it's going to show me those numbers there. So then I could see that my above grade level kids in kindergarten, it's at 100%. And what I really want to see is that lower number be the high number. I would love to see that those kids that are 2 grade levels below has a number of like 140%. But when you look into the individual kids, the numbers are all over the place. I mean, we have one kid, I think the highest number I saw was 420%. They wanted 4, they made 18, 420%. So you can go grade level and get it into those sub areas based on performance, and then you can click on that and you can get to the students to find the real specific. That's where this is a powerful tool. Because again, this is about growth, and also it's really about goal setting and achieving, which is nice because then you can trick the kids, because it really feels a lot like video games in that, like,
A lot of fun.
get your
ways.
next high score, get your next high
Yeah.
score. So it is a far more engaging platform for the students, and then it's more telling. We can go to the next slide.
Dan, just, so two other columns you didn't hit here.
Yeah.
So students assessed, some students are missing. Can you just talk about why somebody would not be reflected? I mean, 77 out of 92.
Yeah. So we upload our student data to iReady like right around now. And then we own those kids forever, whether they showed up with us or not, whether we ever had them, whether they left. We have kids in there also that, because on what shows up on mine, because our staff does it, I have St. Francis students in there because our Title I tutors were going out there. So I can tell you that does not match up with if you look at those totals and you looked at our class sizes, it's going to be off. So we didn't have many kids who didn't take it at all. There are obviously a few for very specific reasons that we decided one way or another that we had data elsewhere, or it was not a meaningful experience to give them that assessment. But I remember last year at this time, we had this and it said like first grade, I only had like 85% participation, and I remember being at home and like looking at it, texting Mary, because I'm like, I don't even know half these kids that are showing up. They were either never enrolled or showed up different ways. But I
pulled the data before you guys finished last year.
yeah. So, but I could tell you that in terms of the seats, the students that we had in front of us, we had a very high participation. but we definitely didn't have 97 second graders last year. But what we did have is that a number of students that were St. Francis that just appear on our rolls because it's one system. All right, so this is another, I just wanted to show this to you. It doesn't necessarily tell you anything, but it is another tool that we have in the system. And what it shows you is obviously the x-axis being, that's more comparative to the SAS. That's a performance measure. And then the y-axis being growth. So ideally you want everyone in that upper right quadrant. If you can't have everyone in the upper right quadrant, you want everyone above that midway horizontal line, which based on that is pretty good. But those two dots each one of those dots represents grade level. So we can look at what our general trends are, how we're performing versus how we're also growing. This is how we perform in math, and then you're just going to see a repeat. Now that I kind of explained it.
I'm sorry, does that come from here? So in other words, like third grade has the 96. Is that third grade that's below the median?
Not necessarily.
Must be, because that's below 100, so that's the 96, I think. So that's like the third grade dot?
Yes. But again, that's their growth measure. But as you can see, they're on the right side of that performance midline. So yes. Did you go backwards?
I have no idea. No, you were doing math, now you're in ELA.
Yes. So again, I kind of just did the whole system, so now we can kind of quickly go through these just to get to see where our ELA performance is.
How does iReady assess writing, or does it not?
There is no long form writing on ELA, on iReady.
It does it through the short form reading, right?
Yeah, but the experience of the SAS writing, the long form, the essay, the written response is pretty exclusive to the SAS. Looking at the ELA results, again, you see pretty typical results from year to year. And again, you can kind of see stronger that growth against that progress median. And then, as you can see, that translates to, that's really pretty ideal of where you want everyone. Everyone is above that growth midline, and we only have one that's right on that performance grade level. Oh, so just to show you, I did include it. I apologize. When I said that you could click on grade one, you could click on a grade and see how it performs. And then that's the result that we can see. So I honestly cannot tell you which grade level. I can't recall which screenshot that was. But I could click on a grade level that it said like 106%, and I can see that I'm seeing pretty good growth at my mid and above. I'm really excited, though, because that 3 or more grade levels, 196 is that median number, which means that we're getting almost double the growth that they want from those kids that are the farthest behind, which is exactly what the goal is. And 100% of those students are making that stretch growth. So that means somewhere in that system, it's clicking. The question is, why is that not translating over to the SAS? That's a question that we're working with the iReady team, and hopefully we can get some answers to kind of figure out and let their psychometricians do their thing to kind of figure out why it's not translating. But in terms of iReady, we're pleased by the results. But again, it gives us that information of general areas of performance, underperformance, overperformance, and can kind of steer us in the right direction. And again, it has those personalized pathways. So you have a student who takes that first benchmark and they underperform in an area. When they go onto they sign into their iReady, guess what they're going to see a whole lot of? They're going to see a whole lot of instruction and practice in that sub area, and maybe not so much, not completely ignored, but they'll get occasional of the ones that they performed highly in just to keep that progress going.
Dan, not to be a killer of joy,
Please.
you focus on the
Kill it.
bottom, and if this is the same student count, it's 3 students that achieve that. Whereas 57 out of 60 were more middle of the pack. So,
Yeah.
you know, just we have to sometimes be careful not to overemphasize small subgroup
No,
outliers.
yeah.
But it's
yeah.
still for those 3
I'm just looking
students,
at
that's
those-
outstanding. Right?
Yeah, for the and yes, it's only 3. And again, this is not about a performance measure, but is what we're doing what it's supposed to be for those 3 kids?
Yes.
Absolutely. I would look at a class size like this and say, high kids are great. Low kids seem to be doing okay. What can we do for those mid kids?
Yeah.
Because those middle kids are, again, go to that. If you could take this and put it back into that graph, that second and third group are going to be more in that center, slightly above that midline. That bottom group is going to be way up in the white quadrant. So, and we can't get it that way, but I just like that visual of the scatter plot. So again, and this is just kind of how I wrap it up. This is whenever we have data conversations, we try to avoid those tripwires, obstacles, and false prophets. It's very tempting to take that one data point and run with it. It's also very tempting to take that one data point and then either apply a whole bunch of context or a whole bunch of explanation and explain your way this way and that way and out of it. It's also important that you don't ignore the context of how the assessment was given, what were the current conditions. And the most obvious tripwire is focusing on one area at the expense of others, which is what we want to avoid. And I've seen it too many times where, we could do back and forth. I used the example before. Wow, we really did not do well in geometry, so we're going to do a focus push on geometry. And then next year you're going to do great in geometry, and guess what? Numbers and operations going to tank. So we don't want to necessarily do that as well. And then I think most importantly, and I often have to remind myself of this, is that this data, this information, this feedback is the question. It's not the answer. So we look at that and say, this should lead to the more questions that lead us to the better answer, as opposed to this being the answer to some question that was never asked. So, are there any questions from the board?
Very thorough update.
Thank you.
Remind me, is iReady mandated, or that's optional?
Every student is given the benchmark.
But as a district,
It is not required.
so how many districts, do we have a sense of how many districts actually use iReady?
It's
Mary,
been
what-
growing significantly.
Well, there are several benchmark assessments, right? I mean, you have iReady, you have STAR.
Most districts give some kind of a benchmarking assessment. A lot are starting to shift to iReady. Many use STAR. We used to use MIWA, which is still used in a number of districts. Ames Web is still used in a number of districts. So there are a few out there. iReady seems to be the one because of the pathways that a lot of districts are starting to shift to. So it's not the only one out there, but most districts will give some other benchmarking type assessment.
But I feel like we test our kids a lot. Lot, right? And really, what's I guess I'm balancing the benefit of iReady versus what we're seeing in SAS, and what's the material difference?
So the material difference is it's real-time data. It is, I would say, much more user-friendly on the teacher.
And the student.
And the student. And again, that built-in of that performance pathway, that can actually guide the student towards. So if you have a student and they have their iReady login, they take the benchmark in the beginning of the year. You get the assessment. Now, as part of station work throughout the classroom, independent work, the student can then be assigned to sign back into your iReady. It'll have an assignment in there that's targeted and tailored to that student to make that targeted growth that we want to see.
It looks at the individual standards that the student is underperforming at, and it will provide them with
additionally, with the 3 times a year, or more often, because the teachers can also track how they're doing on those pathways. They take the ELA, and now the teacher has a classroom set of data in which to create targeted groups. You know, we could say like, all right, because the system will tell you, here are your 2 grade levels before, here are your 2 grade levels behind. It can almost form that. The teacher could look at that and say, is that matching what I'm seeing? If it does, boom, self-made group. What can I do with them? Then you can track it. So it is much more user friendly. And that, again, that 3 times a year. It's also, I will say, the advantage is this is a data point for K1, 2, 3, and 4. Right now, going into this year, 1 grade level has 1 set of usable data for the SAS, and that's 4th grade based on what the 3rd grade did in May. That's all I have for the current student population. So, and I will say, I'm always cautious of testing fatigue, but with the iReady, there is some fatigue. I'm not going to say that this is an easy walk in the park, but it's a much less stressful test on the students. It's a take out your Chromebook. It's an engaging assessment. There are cartoon characters. There's bright colors. And so most times those ELA assessments, or the ELA, the math, the benchmarks, are usually, and I know my teachers, someone's going to email me and say, are you kidding me? It's about 45 minutes. It's a quick hitter, whereas that SAS is hour and a half. Some kids are taking it over days, you know. So it is not as intensive as what the SAS is. And I would say that it's a little bit more user-friendly, and I'd say the data is a little bit more user-friendly. Again, as you can see, the teachers can go into all those things, and you can start clicking around, and you can play, and it can kind of group things for you.
It's immediate feedback to the kids too, because if they take the test one day and then log in 2 days later, they have a personalized pathway to be able to jump into and say, okay, I'm going to do some practice on X, Y, or Z, whether it's in class or whether it's at home.
And the teachers can also target it specifically to what they're teaching. So if it is instruction in numbers and operations base 10 as a new concept, the teachers can be teaching live and in person, but also have that review and reinforcement through iReady.
That's really important.
Yeah, you could assign it as
I'm thinking of this, and I'm hearing what you're all saying. I'm thinking, all right, well, now it's on the kid to self-teach, right?
Yeah, no.
Program and self-teach.
No. Yeah.
Practice and support.
It's an additional thing that they can do to get that exposure, practice, and again, it's engaging. The kids don't necessarily because they can earn games and you know but it's not like, all right, kiddo, you need to work on geometry, so you're going to sit over there and the computer's going to tell you to do the geometry. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll see what the benchmark says, but you're only.
I wonder why your scores. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah. This is not a replacement for instruction. This is an addition to. So as I said, it doesn't replace whole class instruction. It doesn't even replace teacher time. It's always in addition to. Right. So how it's being used in some of our classrooms is as one of the stations. So throughout a 2 or 3 day, say a math station that students are going to work on this activity, they're going to have additional teacher time, and some of the time would be also, all right, and if you're at, group 3, you're now working on iReady for the next 15 minutes, and it's doing those performance pathways. But it's by no means a replacement. It's always done in addition to.
So,
and that addition to gives you some really good.
Is there a correlation between? I don't mean to hog all the questions.
That's fine.
Is there a correlation between the bars that we've seen on the stats, right, and maybe the teacher and the curriculum not hitting the right marks with the students?
So, as part of bringing back, or
some faces, I don't know.
Yeah, there could be, and what we talk about in the PLCs and as we work is that. The deeper you go with the data and the deeper you go with the team data, the more beneficial and meaningful it is, but it's also a much more vulnerable process. So when we're talking about PLCs and we're talking about a grade level, you get to the point where the data is, here's how we did as a grade level overall. Here's how we did as a grade level in these subsets. This is our general overall performance. But then you get deeper and you can say, teacher X, you really nailed it in this subject area. Teacher D, you didn't.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about what's different between your instructional practices. Mm-hmm. Again, but that's about a psychological level of safety that you need to have so that they can be vulnerable and be safe to actually have those honest conversations so that you can get to what are the differences. And you can also do it on the student level. It's not as vulnerable. It's not a peer-to-peer kind of critical friends group, but at the same point, you can look at those students and say, we talk about those small groups, like, these kids are underperforming in this area. I'm going to target it, and now, all right, I need some feedback. I need some data on it. Let's give them this iReady. Let's track it on iReady. I did it. I nailed it. I missed the mark. Or
Instead of breaking
I
it up
missed
by
the mark. What am I having?
Instead of breaking it up by grade, you can actually go deeper into each classroom.
Yeah, each teacher. So
And each student.
the you can.
Kid has a sheet.
I can look.
Well,
I can
get
look
those
at.
results, right? But I mean,
Yeah, based on the access points for the teachers.
Yeah.
So I can look at whole school, and I can break it down by grade, and then by grade I can teach it down by teacher, and then by teacher I can break it down by performance level. Teachers can break it down by their class, and then as PLC, what would require, because I don't believe any teacher has no one fourth grade teacher is going to have the data set for all of fourth grade.
No,
But
no,
the PLC would be,
individual.
the PLC would be, everyone bring your laptop, we're going to open up our iReady, and we're going to talk about it. Again, that's a level of psychological safety that you get to in group dynamics, but you can have those conversations so that we can figure out, overall, we're making the mark, we're missing the mark. As a grade level, subject areas, we're missing it. Teachers, for some reason, you're performing well, you're not. Again, we're talking about viewing data as the question as opposed to the answer.
well, I guess that's where I'm going. It's the red bar attributed to one class as opposed to the entire
So
grade.
I think
Yes, we could get down to that. Well, it wouldn't necessarily be that, but the 2 green, yellow, 2 red bar that shows up as a school, I can see that as a grade level. I can break that into grade level, and then I can click on the grade level, and I can break it down by, and I can see in those areas
Okay.
which teachers match up with the grade level average and which teachers have more green or more red. Again, deeper you go, the more vulnerable you get, but also the more beneficial the data sources.
But I also think that, one of the things that we've talked about at GMS specifically is we have some misinterpretation of some of the standards. And so looking at this data has made us say, okay, wait a second. Why are we focused here when we should be focused here? Well, it was language use in the standards versus the actual application. So it's forced us to have a lot of really pointed conversations in the last few months about why are we focused here when these are not the standards that we should be hitting. Well, it's a slight nuance in the language of the standards
Yeah.
that has forced people to misinterpret what the
Yeah.
standards actually mean. So
And I'll say
go
it's
back and revise it and have those conversations at a team level.
See, I don't know how we have misinterpretation of standards. That should be pretty consistent.
so no. Actually, that's a good point. Let me clarify. It's not necessarily it's not we are doing things that we're not supposed to be doing and vice versa. It's more really about the emphasis level that we've been placing on certain things as opposed to others. We should be doing more of this and less of this based on the standards. And so it's more of an alignment as opposed to a correction, if that makes sense. I know those are kind of synonymous, but again, in my mind, they make a little bit of sense.
Is there any correlation between the kids that are in the yellow or the red, whether they use or don't use iReady on a regular basis?
It sounds like they all have to use iReady.
So every student gets benchmarked. I will tell you that we have had inconsistent use of the pathways, and this year, again, that's why we're having the renewed focus of that iReady core team, and I think it's mostly, I'll take this on me. We got iReady in 2021, which was a year of everyone just, and now we've slowly realized, no, this is a powerful tool. We've actually had teachers use it, so we want to use the strength that's within the building. We have a core team that's going to get a bit more training so that they can roll it out to their grade level. And what we want to do is increase the consistency of use of those pathways. So every student is getting those benchmarks. It's that in between the benchmarks that we would like to add more consistency of exposure to students and seeing it more being used more consistently across classrooms.
In Hudson,
Delineation between the assessments and the pathways, which I think was some of the confusion
Yeah.
that we had in the middle school district.
practice.
Make sure the assessment's only happening 3 times a year, but that pathway which is directed to the student is something that can happen along the way.
In my school, they have it 2 times a week during focus or win, in certain kids, it picks up, if you're having trouble with multiplication, you're gonna have multiplication. I, of course, am gonna have fractions and word problems, cause that's my downfall.
Yeah.
It's just practice in a fun way, and they bounce balls, and it makes noises, and
But again, it's always growth focused, so even those kids that are 2 above, it's gonna give that growth magic, and it's gonna give that growth pathway so they have, we wanna continue to grow, and we don't want anyone to necessarily plateau. But at the same point, those ones that are lower, we need to speed them up so that we can reconcile the lines.
so they might get it 3 days a week. Or I might have them work on it in my class, my group of students.
Yeah, and that's where it comes to teacher choice, and that's where we need to just bring it more into line in terms of consistency. It was rolled out. We've used it as a benchmark. It's always been good data that we've necessarily used. I don't think we've harnessed the full strength of it and the impact that it can have. So that's why we're kind of making it a focus this year.
Thank you.
So I definitely think questions are important. Does anyone have any more questions for Dan? Because we still have
You got two more.
two more presentations.
Just to
Yeah.
circle
I'm
back
the
to-
short one.
Circle back to one comment though, Andrew. You sort of led it with, an emphasis on the assessments, right? And I think
I think
what's
it's more
different.
applicable for middle school, right?
Well, I think
My
what's
original
different is that the assessments are more announced. If you go back 20 years, go back to 30 years when we were in school, we were assessed by our teachers all the time. I mean, how many times did I sit there taking timed multiplication tests? And
3
I
minutes,
had
100
so
problems.
many minutes to get through
Haunts
that,
me to this
and
day.
I got a score, and it was sent home to my parents and so forth. So
Or is it California Achievement Test?
yeah,
Oh
so
my God,
all
the
of these
California-
things have been around forever. It's just now it's computerized and
Iowa test.
and it's linked. Those were like standalone things you did and you got a score. Now you're getting a pathway that's being carved out from that, and it feels like we're doing iReady all the time.
Right.
It's really not. To me, it's no different than what has been going on since I was in elementary school myself. And Mrs. Pierce sat there with and
Yeah.
more instant feedback and more personalized responses. Although it was pretty personalized when I needed to do multiplication again because I didn't get it done in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And I think only because we only have one word, which is assessment, we have the 3 benchmarks. Those are the real data points. In there, is it assessing along the way, and is it giving us feedback? Yes. But again, just because we don't have that other word, every time we say iReady, or every time we use iReady, it doesn't mean big benchmark assessment. That's 3 times a year. Towards the beginning of the year, in the doldrums of winter, and towards the end of the year. And that just gives us those, like in a video game, your checkpoints. So,
Thank you again.
all right,
Thank you.
can you advance for her and I'll be right back? Yeah. Jen, can I just give you, this is what came across the fax to our office.
I got it.
I'm going to get out of here.
Thank you. Hi there. So I'm going to try to be thorough but brief, knowing that it's already 7:45 and we still have another presentation to go forward with. And I want to start by saying I'm very lucky. And I'm very lucky to have a very dedicated, engaged staff and hardworking students. So although some of the data that we're going to talk about today is tough, I just want to focus on the fact that my staff are rock stars, teachers, paraprofessionals, in between, because they have spent the last 3 years working with construction in the building, rolling carts down the hallway to teach kids in different environments. And I have to put that out there as the first and forefront of what we're talking about today, because there's going to be some hard conversations and hard information that comes up through this. But I want to start with that caveat first to say they're incredible and they work very hard.
Thank you. We know.
So what assessments do we give at LMS? In May, students in grade 5 through 8 take the SAS summative assessment. So we have 5 through 8 ELA and math, and 5 and 8 take science in May. In September, January, and June, students in grades 5 through 8 take the iReady and reading and math benchmark tests, which are really a one-day wonder for each of those, and it's not a full day of assessment. They have 2 hours in the morning before best that they would accomplish that test. There were a few kids that may have taken longer, but would be able to break out into smaller groups. And then this past year, we implemented for the first time the performance pathways, where the students had one 20-minute lesson in math and one 20-minute lesson in reading that were accomplished during any time throughout the week. They could have done it as homework. They could have done it during best time. And we implemented that for the first time this year just to see if that helped to close some of those gaps as we take a look as we go through. So the key questions that we have, as we had last year, is what is the data? What does it tell us? And how are we going to respond to what the data tells us? So I click on the next slide. This is our ELA SAS as a whole school. We beat that 55% mark in regards to, or 54% mark, sorry, in regards to kids performing at or above grade level, which is good to see overall. Moving to the next slide. This is our spring data by grade level, and if you printed out a copy of this packet, I apologize. As Dan said, when you take the screenshots and are clipping things out, the first time I screenshotted it, I didn't have it 5, 6, 7, 8, so a couple of the data screens. So if you printed out a paper version, I had to update that. Thank you to Jess Garrett at home, if you're watching, because she caught it and said, hey, I don't think that's the 8th grade data. And I went back and looked and I was like, thank you for catching that. You're correct. We have the right information, because it comes up for us, it was like 5, 7, 6, 8. It was strange. So that is the accurate data on the screen here. The next, this is SAS data again for ELA, and going the slope down, it's a 3-year look back. So you take a look at where those kids were in 5th grade, moving up to 6th grade in 2022, and then they were in 7th grade this year. So you see that we went from 16% in the blue in 5th grade down to 12% in 6th grade, and then back up to 16% in the blue this year. But we did have a huge increase in that green in the cohort as you look down the slope, which is great news, and something we want to see is that increase in those greens and blues. When you look down the slope again, you take a look at 6th grade to 7th, 7th to 8th. That cohort also had a bump up that we notice in 7th grade. So you see a significant increase in 7th grade, and then a little backslide as they move down to 8th grade. Then we took a look at the cohort that was in 7th grade. So you can look going diagonally, but now this also allows you to look across, especially in that grade 7 area, where they're consistently performing very well in regards to those green and blue marks. So that is kudos to the energies and efforts in that area.
I'm taking my question back.
Okay. So I did mine a little bit differently. I go right from SAS right into iReady to take a look at the difference. And what I want to draw your attention to here is where we are versus where we were. So if you take a look at the mid or above grade level, from September of last year to the end of the year last year, we increased 10% of our students in that area. So we went up with 10% of our students, which is 30 students. If you think about approximately 354 students, 10% went up to the mid or above grade level. And if you think about iReady, it gets harder as you go up, so it's harder to close those gaps. In elementary school, no offense to Dan, they got the easy apple. We have the more complex tasks and the more difficult questions that are being asked of our students. So to close those gaps is really saying something. We did increase also at the green level, which is the earlier on grade level. The one grade level below luckily shifted in that direction. So all of our bars shifted towards that green side, and the red got smaller, which was our overall goal. If you take a look at the reading by domain, thank goodness, we passed our phonological awareness, because that is tested out in 3rd grade. So if we didn't, I'd have some really big concerns. We have that phonics, which is also an elementary skill, but we have all of our students at all grade levels, including special education students, taking it. So it allows us to see that that's an area for some of our special education students to continue to work on. And what I want to draw your attention to in this one is the vocabulary section. If you recall last year when I sat at this table, we had a very low vocabulary score. We put some concerted efforts into classroom instruction and teaching. It went from one of our lowest areas to one of our highest areas, which says great things. But as Dan said, then we saw the converse happen, and our informational text took a little bit of a backslide. So although putting the eggs in the basket of vocabulary did help us improve that vocabulary score, we recognize that that informational text bar slid in the opposite direction as you're building the boat as you go. The next screen shows you the overall placement from our August placement last year to our end of the year placement. So it kind of just gives you that same thing we were talking about with the bars, as well as the student breakdown of the number of students that improved. Next is the iReady by grade. As Dan talked about, that median growth, taking a look at that first column of the average of students making at least 100. We want that bar to be 100% all the way down. Again, remembering that as you go up in the grades, it gets more difficult to close that gap because those students are being asked more difficult and higher level thinking questions. And where we didn't make as much was in that annual stretch growth. So we want to see that bar moving up in that column as well. But we did have our total number of students assessed almost across the board. Everybody that was in a seat in front of us was able to take the assessment, and we have that data to go back to. One of the other things in iReady that it does show us is not only does it give us the breakdown by student, but when the teacher does that grouping, and going back to Andrew, not just having the kids sitting in front of a screen and seeing a computer test, the teacher in the performance pathways can target and take a look at how did Jen Grantham perform on this test today? And it allows her to click in, and then there's a grouping. So she goes into a grouping of this group of students can use this targeted skill in this area. So when that teacher is doing small group instruction, that teacher is doing remediation during best time or extra teaching during best time, they now have not what they think or not what they're wondering. It's here's what it's showing that they need. They can target their direct skills, their direct person-to-person teaching, and a quick hit of this is what you need to get caught up, and then go practice with the iReady to get that 20-minute lesson minimally. What I can say is our iReady quadrants, we see some really great news in here. Grade 7 was off the charts, that top bubble there in the high performance and high growth. And grade 6 also is in that top quadrant. Grade 8, again, with a more difficult task, and it tests out at a certain level. I think it's grade 10 or 11 is the highest level it can get to. So if we have kids who are reading above that level, it doesn't allow them that same growth because they're already reading at the top of the scale. But they had the high performance with low growth. And then grade 5 had low performance and low growth as they adjusted to the middle school environment, something that we're going to keep looking at. I know they were working really hard with new curriculum and new information this year, and they'll continue to grow and do great things. Next slide. I talked a little bit about this already. Our focus on vocabulary last year resulted in an improvement both in SAS and in iReady, in an improvement in scores by our students. But this year we're going to need to focus, not take the eggs out of the vocabulary basket. We want to continue loading that basket, but we want to make sure we maintain that across the board focus and not losing the focus on informational text. And we're going to be asking, it's not just the ELA teachers' jobs. I know Dan said he can only see, that his teachers can only see their classes, but in the middle school it's a little different. They're able to see the whole grade level. And at our PLC environments, they're talking about how the students are performing as a grade level, how in best can they support different areas of relative strength or weakness. I know there were strength areas that were focused on with the addition of Mrs. Provenza last year, and book groups that were done in lieu of iReady because the students were showing that high level of function last year. And then that our ability to target direct intervention in the area of informational text in science and social studies, because that is the type of reading that both SAS and iReady are asking our students to do. We also need to improve our instruction in writing to a prompt, and we'll be working with our reading writing specialists and staff to kind of look at doing a school-wide
good old-fashioned handwriting prompt or typing prompt that is for the students to get a prompt they're teaching to and have some inter-rater reliability where the teachers are scoring those assessments to a rubric that matches across the board so that we can see, and the students are used to writing to that prompt because they're not, and it's going to help improve their writing instruction and go from there. Moving on to math, our summative math is relatively weaker than our summative stats.
Is a measure of
Making sure we're back on.
Whereas our summative math is lower relatively than our reading overall. It's a known fact, but we have some highlights to take a look at, including looking again at 7th grade with that 21% of students in that advanced math class who are demonstrating that above grade level. 25% of our students, 50% of our students in 7th grade are performing at or above grade level in math in 7th grade. And 8th grade is not too far behind with that 38%. Doing that mental math right now as I'm sitting here, I'm testing myself as I go. But again, as you go further in the grades, the rigor and the depth of knowledge gets more challenging and difficult. So I think that's important to focus on. But I think we still have to focus on the fact that we have a large percentage of our students who are not performing at grade level in the area of math.
Jen, just on that slide, the bars are so similar, even though they really, it skewed somehow. I'm not sure what.
It is skewed. That is because that was the one that I had the wrong screen of, so I had to screenshot it on my phone to try to dump it in last night when Jessica Rett gave me the call at the nth hour. So it was a phone screenshot versus a computer snip, which is why it might look a little funky. They're not the same if you look at the numbers, but
This 2% is the same size as 41%.
yeah. I don't know why.
Scale.
That's what I was like.
It is
Pretty
one
even distribution.
solid screenshot that I clipped and shrunk to fit into the bar, but it did not carry across that way. I wish there was a better way to pull the data to be able to
I
present
just
it
want
to
to
you
make sure,
all.
as we're analyzing, is that our staff aren't saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's all good.
From individual screens and it's not.
So looking at the same slide down, I think we have some great news to share. Looking at math going from 5th grade, the same cohort of students from 5th grade to 7th grade. We took those kids in 5th grade. We only had 19% of the students performing at or above grade level, moving up to 50% of those students in 7th grade. So I think we're doing the right things. It's just a question of continuing to do more of the right things and continuing to build and closing those gaps in that individualized instruction in the areas that are relative weaknesses for the individuals in our classrooms are things that we're all working on together. Sorry, I'm behind a screen here. So this is our iReady math, and I think some relative celebrations here, going from 5% up to 20%. Again, we grew 15% and from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So it's showing that that growth is there, from 16% to 25, from 47 to 37. So yes, that yellow bar shrunk, but it moved to the right side. It moved to the left. It didn't go to the right. And our 2 red bars shrunk as well. Our overall placement by domain, as Dan mentioned, geometry, it's a killer every year for everyone. It's the one that comes last in most curriculums. So it's the one that's covered at the end of May. And it is the area that we have the lowest performance as a school. This is just that bar graph change where the lighter bar is the fall bar and the top bar is the most recent. Next screen. This is showing that annual typical growth. Again, we love to see that first bar that the median, the average of our students are meeting or approaching to meeting that annual typical growth. And we have a good percentage of our students that are meeting that stretch growth, but we'd like to increase that bar as we move forward by closing those more than one grade level gaps that students have. Our quadrants graph shows low performance and high growth, and then we're kind of right there on that bubble for 2 of our grade levels, and then low performance and low growth in grade 5. So this is just a snippet of information, but it allows us to, you know, think about how we want to really shift everybody to the right side of that middle line. We're seeing growth over time for most grade levels, even in SAS. Students and staff are going to need to focus on problem solving, which will respond to both numbers and operations and the problem solving strands in SAS. And we have some intentional planning to embed geometry and algebraic thinking to be incorporated in cross-curricular planning this year as we look ahead to what's going to happen. SAS Science, celebrating that we have 29% of our students in 5th and 8th grade performing at or above grade level, recognizing, yikes, this is an area that we definitely need to put some focus on. I will say the science instruction that we're seeing isn't matching the results we're seeing on the tests. I will say in 5th and 8th grade, the teachers are doing amazing things in science, but the problem is we're testing in Swahili and teaching in Greek. So if you think about that, you know, if we're talking about looking at, for example, Jim Piva's class, where they're doing amazing hands-on experience, scientific method, digging deep into scientific theories. The kids love it. If you ask any of the students what's going on in there, but they're not sitting the way that the SAS science assessment used to have labs, that they came in with these big buckets of labs that they used to have to do to build and do that active practicing before they answered the questions. Now it's all online, so the kids just, I don't think, engage the same way they do with the robust experiments that we're seeing. So we're going to find a way to kind of bridge that gap without teaching to the test, but helping the kids understand the types of questions that the SAS science exam is asking. And we're also, we've been in conversations with Mary and taking a look at what the science curriculum is and does it align and meet all of the standards that we need to have our students understanding by the end of 8th grade. We're lucky that science happens. If there's 3 times science SAS is given, it's given twice in middle school. So lucky that we get that opportunity to show that growth, but at the same time, we definitely have some work to do.
Jen, because you're doing a grade span, so the 5th grade assessment is a 3 through 5. How's the communication back to Griffin relative to that performance? So, you know, you own the data, but you don't own 2/3 of the data. So how's that go?
I think that we need to improve that close that gap. We haven't had a whole lot of opportunity for cross grade level science planning. So, you know, from within our building, yes, but across schools, not as much. I think that's something that we could look at planning for this year. And then the next screen shows the breakdown by grade level. Relative celebration there is 36% of our 5th graders were performing at or above grade level in science. An area to question and wonder is that 56% of our 8th graders were not. And then that performance distribution, this doesn't give you the same necessarily slide like the pink arrows on the other screens, just because it's not the same cohort of kids. Next year, I'll be able to come back and say, in spring of 2021, this group of 5th graders, this is how they scored, and now in spring of 2024, these are the 8th graders, here's how they scored. So we'll be comparing the cohort to the cohort. Right now, we're just looking across the grade levels, and unfortunately, we have a downward trend. What does this mean? Our science data, I can't sugarcoat it, shows we need work in science. We'll be planning to meet with staff across grade levels to develop a plan for instruction and retention of information to improve outcomes. And staff and students in science will be using the SAS modules, which is not assessment, but teaching and instruction in the same language as the SAS assessments are given, to be able to see what that looks like, to get that exposure and understanding. But that's with teacher instruction, not just sitting on a test and taking that test in the modules.
Now, I know that it's difficult because it's only, that the science is only in 5th and 8th grade. Are there ways to incorporate that kind of activities for the kids in all grade levels so that
That's
they
the
have
plan.
that? Okay.
So the science, what the data tells us is not, because it's not just a 5th and an 8th grade problem. This is a 3rd grade to 8th grade problem, and will become a problem for Jake by 11th grade. I haven't seen his 11th grade data yet, but I'm guessing.
Students don't have the buy-in for tests anymore. I see it every day. They don't want to do it. And even in high school, I'm not going to college, I don't care. I'm gonna make a Christmas tree out of, I don't know, it's just, I don't know how to motivate kids anymore. I mean,
Liz, we hear that
Yeah.
from staff. So one of the things that we're challenged with is, if that's universally true, then we should be comparing our scores across the state. And if we're not showing the level of growth others are, then it's more true with us. So we have to fix that. And that's the piece that we're trying to focus on, because, we should not be an average district. All indicators for Litchfield
Correct.
is we should be exceeding. And we continue to struggle at average.
I had 14 students, and I said, we are going to have a pizza party if every single one of you goes up 1 point. All but one student went up, because usually in the spring, the scores, they peak in the winter. And then they had buy-in. It was almost like they needed a reward. And I was done. I mean, talk about making a big deal. I was so proud of them. We had pizza. It was awesome.
I'm going to say, Mrs. Chu, you're back. Can I steal you for this one? Mrs. Chu works with students in our school and works on their iReady.
Mrs. Chu, can you please come up here and introduce yourself?
I'm putting her on the spot,
Well,
but
people like to see who's talking from the audience.
They know who I am as soon as I open my mouth. They don't need to see me.
Mrs. Chu
That's true.
would, one of the things about kind of hanging that hat on how students were and that buy-in, I can't tell you how many times she'd come down with a student and knock on my door and go, Mrs. Grantham, you've got to see this. And she would do her very wonderful British accent and share how the kids performed and what the kids felt.
And how they felt, and it wasn't just saying it to someone within the school. I asked that student, do you want to tell anyone else? And they're like, well, who would I want to tell? How about someone at home? Because I think I did it with you. Yeah. And I had them call home and preface it by saying, they're not in
Nothing's
trouble.
wrong.
And say, hey,
What happened?
Yeah.
Mom or Dad, this is what I just did. And a few times parents didn't know how to react because they hadn't heard positives. And the kids were just like,
Makes all the
oh my
difference.
God, oh my God.
I think when we had so we had goal setting in January for our January iReady. 5th through 8th grade, every student set a goal. And their goal wasn't to be perfect. That wasn't to be, but it was to grow from where they started.
Right.
And some of them set lofty goals, some of them set minimal goals, but we celebrated that growth of students. And you'd hear kids walking down the hallway going, hey, what'd you get on iReady this time? How'd you do it? Like they were middle schoolers. They don't get excited about those
No,
things.
it wasn't about the number either. It was about how much they improved. So it didn't matter whether you're a
Yep.
typical student or not. I went up 60 points. Yeah, I went up 20.
Or they would celebrate. I had a student come in with like tears in their eyes saying I had 460% growth in January. It's great. Do we have more work to do? Absolutely. But I think we have to celebrate those small victories. Sorry to put you on the spot, but you were a rock star. Thank you very much. I did that last time too.
Yeah.
That brings me to the end of my data presentation.
Do you think because we maybe don't do enough testing throughout the year, regular testing, quiz work? Or,
So I think we definitely do. I think there's summative assessments that are given in every class along the way. I think there's wrap up of the unit, wrap up of the curriculum where they are doing that assessment. It's just different language. And I think what we have to align, like the ways that SAS asks questions, as I said, teaching in Swahili and testing in Greek it's that different. It would be like if I sat here and did this whole presentation to you in Mandarin Chinese, you would be looking at me like, what are you talking about? For the most part, I'm assuming. But it's that different a language, and it's not about teaching to the test. It's about teaching that rigorous vocabulary and building that rigor and understanding of the depth of knowledge that's required in a dipstick. The SAS is a dipstick. It's testing where they are at that day, at that moment in time, which could be reflective of how their overall performance is, but it also could just be a rough day for them that day.
Further questions?
Again, I'm just trying to balance all of this, and after 2 presentations, my head is spinning, right? I mean, it is. I'm trying to balance this with, all right, grade 5, 75% of the kids got honors.
We are in
More than 75% of the kids.
We are in 1,000% agreement on that. But as a community, from the day I set foot in this district, that is a highly valued paper/plaque. Do I get that honors and high honors? And parents will call and push, and my student has a C and they didn't earn a C, they didn't get the C, and they'll call and they'll push and they'll argue and they'll argue and they'll argue until they get what they want.
Okay, but now I'm balancing this against SAS, right? And I
Right.
see 83% of our kids are below average
Correct.
in math,
Correct.
but yet the vast majority got honors.
As a community, I think that that's something that we need to evaluate together. Parents, teachers,
I don't know why
students.
it's on parents. It's the staff that are grading the kids, right?
It's the staff that are grading the kids.
But ask the staff how many calls they get from parents when that grade comes out and the pressure that they get.
But then you need to stick to the grade that the students are getting. Like, I don't understand this. So am I hearing that we're fabricating grades to
Well,
appease
it's
the
a
parents?
it's a combination of factors.
That's what I'm hearing. That's the message I'm hearing right now.
I think this is where competency and proficiency come into it. If we're grading on competency and what students know and can apply, and not just on, not giving an A because you showed up and you did your homework. I mean, this is the talk that we keep having and having and having. If we're truly focusing on competency and proficiency, then the scores will match the grades.
And the redos and the retakes are part of the picture, but not the solid goal. After that honors, I'm telling you, we're going to be reevaluating how we look at the honors assembly at the end of the year, when that takes place, because those grades have to be in ahead of time in order to get them. With the new 15% of the grade counting towards formative, summative, there's going to be some adjustment, I'm imagining, as we look at this year. But it was a conversation that as a staff we talked about, to say this doesn't match what we in PLCs. When we look at SAS data, although it is a dipstick, it's one snapshot in time, it doesn't match what we have for overall grades.
Not even close.
And Andrew, just my analysis of it, so as your superintendent, I am telling you that I believe if you do the sum total of SAS scores at the elementary, at the middle school, SAT scores, you look at every single data searcher that's out there, we are an average school district. Mm-hmm. And yet what you're talking about is one measurement that is showing we're above average. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets a gold star. That's the disconnect. And what doesn't match? That's what doesn't match. We're giving way too many A's and B's for kids who are not performing on grade level and doing what they need to do. I've been saying that for 6 years.
So how do we stop it? Where does it stop? When the parent calls, we tell them no.
It starts with this board committing that you want there to be a direct connection between how our students perform, and that improving against those measurements is a priority. And as long as we are getting pressure, how do I say this? Like we have too many bogeys going on. And we need to focus on what really matters here, and it's that performance. And frankly,
the performance on the test aligns to the performance on the competencies. That's the reality of it.
Then why are they getting A's?
Right.
Because the instruction is not aligning to the instruction and assessment is not aligning to the competencies. Honest truth, That's the reality of it.
So if
And-
we're reading Lord of the Flies and they have to figure out what, I don't know, what's a competency under reading a book?
The competency for reading is analyzing text to be able to,
So Mary doesn't know who blows the conch or whatever, and you don't know who Piggy is. Is this the right book?
Yes.
You shouldn't be getting an A.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, but you just
been a
did,
long
but you just did
but
deal,
if the assessment is who blew the conch, A, B, C, or D, I'm able to figure it out pretty easily.
you're on
But that ties
DOK,
back
you're
to
on
writing, that
DOK
we
one
need more
stuff though.
writing.
These tests are not doing DOK one.
No.
They're at a
threes and
higher level.
fours.
Explain what DOK is.
Depth of knowledge, level 1.
Right.
Who blew the conch?
Which is just
There's
just
one answer.
recall.
There's one answer,
Is
right?
the recall of information.
Yep.
And none of our competency-based assessments should be maxing out there.
Mm-hmm.
They should be up to DOK 3 and 4 where kids are being asked to
Why they're
apply
blowing
the
it?
skills. Why does she blow the gun?
It's a he, isn't it?
I-
Yeah, it's a he.
Honestly, I hate to say that.
I think in the original book, they were all boys.
Yeah.
They were choir boys.
It's been a while.
Now there are all kinds of things.
Never, but that should be, it's not who blew it, it's why did they blow it?
And what was the symbolism
And
behind that?
what did that
Yeah.
mean?
That would be an essay question on
think-
that test.
I think that would be, not to say, to tell anybody here what to do, this is at your purview, but that'd be a great community forum to talk about what depth of knowledge is and why when my student can recall who blew the conch, that's great, but that's not what we're asking when we get to demonstrating competency on grade level. It's a much higher level thinking skill, and this is what it will look like. This is how deep they're able to go independently, because it's not that I had help at home with the homework, I turned it in, here's what I got on the grade. That's great that they're getting help at home and support, but when they're looking at performing that competency on their independent level, is it on grade level with that high depth of knowledge?
And that's where we run into the issues that we've run into as a community. I mean, I hate to say it, but we just backtracked. We did. And when you add that all into, where are the kids performing? Now we have 15 points where it's just they did the work. So
I disagree with
I
that
disagree.
statement. I do. I disagree with that statement.
It,
Time will tell, but I disagree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
time will tell, but
Time will tell.
here's the thing. If we are serious that we want our report card generated scores to reflect knowledge and growth, that's not what they're reflecting. That's why there's a disconnect. They're talking, those scores are based on compliance. They're based largely on compliance, I would argue.
The ones now?
Correct. That's why we're giving so many A's and B's. Who's playing school well? Who's coming along? And
Yeah.
that's what I mean by compliance versus who knows the material, who's demonstrated that they know the material. Those are two different
and you
things.
can apply it in an independent and a novel setting.
Well, they can do that for 85% of
And
their assignments.
Ultimately, they should be able to do it in a real world setting.
And the path of least resistance for our faculty are to give grades that have people feel like, oh, I feel good about this. My kid's on the honor roll.
So the short
path
answer
of
is
least
that the
resistance.
tests are too easy, or the summatives are too easy. I'm trying to get the right lingo.
But
Is
this
that
is
it?
also why we're also receiving consistent feedback that these kids are not ready for whatever's next in life.
Right. We're doing them no favors
We're
and
doing no
doing.
favors.
So do we have any, Mary, can you control what the tests are? I mean, do we have any control over what the tests are? If the tests should be a more in-depth question other than
Yes.
who blew the conch?
As a district,
Yep.
we have given some significant instruction to teachers and to the buildings on what they should look like. Can I oversee every assessment that is given?
Need Advil.
It's physically impossible. I'm one person.
No, I understand that, but the school, I mean, the test should be rigorous, right? I know everybody hates that word these days, but there should be some rigor.
Rigor.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Not being a community member, not knowing, being new to the district for 1 year, are our kids going to college and flunking out?
Yes.
Like a lot. I'm talking, are our Campbell graduates going off to secondary education
and they're home by Thanksgiving.
Oh, I don't know. I think there are a lot that are leaving after the first or second year.
And they come back and they've been interviewed year after year after year, and they've been telling people they're not ready, they're not ready.
I understand that, but can I play devil's advocate for a minute?
Absolutely.
College is hard. College is different than high school.
Oh, absolutely.
I wasn't ready for college when I went to college. I said that my first day of comp 100 because it was harder. It was harder. Again, I'm not saying the rigor. I hate that word. I'm not saying that it's so tough at Campbell. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, if we're going to look at multiple forms of data, if we're going to talk about what achievement really is, like let's look at all the data points too, and be able to have those conversations, and not say, you know, the kids. Oh, I wasn't ready for college. Well, you graduated, you did well, or you're still there, and you're coming back now and share your experience with us. You know, and we'll show our graduation, you know, report here in a few minutes. We'll show where our kids are going. We'll try to better track what our alumni and that sort of data as well. But it's tough to jump right to that conclusion. Again, you'll see in a minute. We've got a ton of room to grow at the high school. It's our growth is going to be the goal and focus of Campbell High School. But I don't think it's just the instruction. I don't think kids aren't prepared for college when they leave here. I think there's a lot of things that we really need to look at and start having conversations about, and not just say it's the assessments, it's this or it's that. I think that it's a multifaceted onion, and that's what running a district is. It's being able to look at all the data and going from there.
I don't think we can point the fingers in one direction, I think, is the answer to this question. I think that there are a lot of pieces to the puzzle that we need to sit together as a district, including community members, and come to the table and take a look at what does this look like, what are our expectations, and how do we help our students rise to their highest ability and to their highest expectations so that they are ready for college or career, whichever it is that they choose as a district. We have a portrait of a learner. Let's focus on those skills of what we're expecting our students to graduate with for life, not just for achieving a certain letter on their report card.
Okay.
Mic drop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys just want to breeze through this and email me with questions. We can do that as well.
Nice try.
All right, if we want to jump right to slide 3 and 4, we're going to start with our SAS data. In the pink reddish color, that's our current rising seniors. That's the class of 2024. And the greenish color is when the graduating class, when they took the exam when they were juniors. So, you're looking at this, you can see comparing the two classes, we're obviously not on a trend that we would like to see when it comes to the science SAS exam.
Is there an area that's consistent all the way through? Like the kids don't know how to graph in middle school and high school? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Looking at the next slide, it breaks it down into the content
Okay.
areas.
This is grade 11, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Just grade 11.
Yes,
Just
the
grade
11th
11.
graders take it.
in eighth.
I'm
Yeah.
getting it.
In it,
Only science though.
if you look at this, again, the dark green is our current seniors when they took the exam as juniors. The lighter shades are the class that just graduated.
I like the arrows.
Yeah.
Ms. Grantham's arrows. There
My biggest takeaway as we look at this, there's more above or at near than there is below. Again, is it where we want it to be or where it could be? Not at all. Our above standard, we definitely can work on getting that higher. So if you look at the next slide, the key takeaways, the next steps, we're underperforming. I think we're on a 5 or 6 year downward trend when it comes to SAS scores. But again, we're more than 50% at or above if we're going to look at a positive.
These are two different cohorts. This isn't one cohort in 2023
Correct.
and again in 2024. So
Correct.
we're looking
It's
at
the graduating
Two
class.
different
is
classes.
like
two different
of
groups of
the letter
kids,
Correct.
which impacts, I mean,
cohorts.
doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
mean that we're not doing a great job. It's just that that cohort scored differently than last year's cohort.
Look at it across 5 or 6 years,
Right.
then
right,
I
but
think
just
you can
looking at
start to
this-
put trends
Right.
We're looking
together.
at 2 years, right?
Yeah, it's just 2
And,
years.
I mean, I'm looking at this data and my initial reaction is what changed? What changed between the 2-year period where now it's worse than it was the prior year?
Well, it's different kids.
Different kids.
I only have 1 year, so
Yeah.
I don't know what else has changed.
I can tell you if you look at the 3-year, it went up
Mm-hmm.
and then it went back down. So again, there's inconsistency to it. And the other piece is that the SAS science has only been in place for my first year here 5 years ago. It was in like beta test.
So it's a relatively new
It's a
test.
fairly new test.
How do these, we don't know yet how these correlate with state.
They're not much different. And,
Okay.
I mean, we're right around, in looking at the scores from last year, we were slightly over the state average last year. We don't have the state numbers for this year for the high school science SAS, but, my guess is we will be either right around, we'll either be a little bit above or a little bit below.
Yeah.
Barry, that's state averages. Have you looked at our peer cohort? How do we compare
I
there?
looked at them last year, and I pulled all that data, and I think I actually shared it with the board last spring. I pulled all the SAS and SAT data for our peer cohort. I can't speak specifically to it, but we were, on average with our peer cohort, we were on the lower end. And at all grade levels, and we were right around the state average, either a little bit above or a little bit below, looking at our data from last year. I'll do the same data analysis this year, but we won't get that data until.
I ask about the peer cohort because, again, we're performing at average. Our peer cohort is not performing at average. So we're on the lower end of the peer cohort, is my understanding, because our peer cohort is an above-average cohort.
And again, that was all data.
Is that the whole group, Mike, or is that just in one particular district you're talking about?
So the peer cohort is about, I don't know, 10 or 12 districts that we align with that,
Like Bow,
based on
Pelham.
demographics, we should be able to,
So not for this year.
that's a fair comparison, right?
It was 2020.
On the same population.
Yeah, similar, most of them are single town schools, similar size, similar demographics.
Demographics.
So, my takeaways, we're obviously going to focus our PLC time, looking at our curriculums and finding out where's the disconnect between, and again, not teaching to the test, but, if these are the state standards of earth, space science, physical science, and life science, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? But the big thing right now is staff turnover in the science department and being able to recruit and retain quality staff so that we can get some consistency and build upon that.
It's everywhere, Mr. Hess.
Okay, that's part of the answer, right?
Yeah.
SAT scores. So this is for our current seniors. 105 out of 116 students were tested. And again, this is us compared to the state, compared to the national average.
So remember, this test was given in the fall, so, no,
March, it's in March.
the
The
SATs?
they take
Oh,
the PSAT in the fall.
That's right. So, I stand corrected,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, but some
you have
seniors
you
took it
have
again.
this
My
you
son
have the
took it
state
again.
comparison.
Correct. The next slide is, again, a comparison of this year and last year at the high school, at the state, and the national average. Again, we're lower across the board except for above the national average. Percentage meaning benchmarks.
What does met both benchmarks mean?
So you met the English and the math.
So do all the kids
So you
take the
can meet,
SAT?
you can meet just one and not the other.
What are the benchmarks though?
So for the English, for the writing, it's 480,
Oh,
and for the
okay.
math, it's 530.
I see.
But it's the two scores below it, Tina. It's
I see.
who met the
The writing and-
ERW and
Yeah.
who met the math. So
Okay,
it's the
got it.
English and the math.
So this counts as our state text. So say my son wants to be a plumber and has no desire to go to school and doesn't give a hoot about SAT scores. They're using this instead of the SAS as their data point. Is that correct?
So why do they have to take the test if they're not
But if
interested in
I
going to
may,
college?
Because they're using it as their.
So the SAT is a college test in the
Yeah.
past. I mean, that's how we grew up with it, right? But the same plumber would say, I don't give a hoot about the SAS, or I don't give a hoot about the
Right.
whatever. So, you know,
Yeah.
the same argument has been said about every state assessment ever given at the high school level. So they aligned it to the SAT because there is some buy-in for
Because they were
those who are
taking
going
two
on.
at one point at the high school. They were taking both.
They were taking a kneecap
Mm-hmm.
for science, English, and math.
So the next slide, again, starting in 2018, we've been giving PSAT 8-9, the 10th and 11th grade as well.
Give them back.
So on the next slide, you'll see kind of some longitudinal data.
If you were to put Jen's arrows on this, how would they go? Point to how they would go.
At the next, well, the next slide, I don't have the arrows, but I have the colors.
Oh.
On the next slide.
Got it.
Yes. So just, it follows the cohorts, for, you know, when they took the PSAT 8-9, PSAT 10, 11, and then the exam, and how they've done in.
So they're
year.
improving year to year.
Correct. Their scores are going up, but it's not in line with state averages.
Okay.
Which are going up more
More-
rapidly.
Yes. Yeah. Next slide, my takeaways. Again, we're still on a downward trend. We're underperforming. I think as a school, I think we can do better. You know, we're below the state average, but we're above the national average. You know, we'll take wins where we can get. And again, you know, this is PLC time across all contents. This isn't a math issue or an English issue. This is across the board. What types of questions are we asking of kids on assessments, formative or summative, that are preparing them for the level of questioning they're going to see on an SAT? I think we need to look at the math curriculum overall and see how much time we're spending on certain topics. You know, when we look at the real world and what they need and kind of giving an average of that. I think we've got a perfect opportunity. If we're looking to, Jake, you got to get SAT scores up. We've got a new flex block CAG time where we can do some quality SAT prep for our juniors to better prepare for the exam. So I think that we have a nice opportunity there. AP testing is next. On slide 16, you can see our 5-year score summary. Current year all the way over to the right. We have less kids taking exams or taking the AP classes. Our exam numbers are going down. You know, and our students who are scoring 3 or above, we went down a little bit from the previous year as well.
Enrollment has also gone down too.
Correct.
So did the students know that they have to take the test now? Because we did that in the handbook, correct?
Correct.
If they take an AP
If
class.
they listen to the board meeting, if they've read the handbook.
Oh, okay.
And they're going
That's
to
gonna
get.
be covered in the first few days of school?
Them and their parents are gonna
Buckle
get
up.
an invite to an AP meeting with the principal at the beginning of the school year.
Oh, fun.
But Liz, to clarify that, make sure I have it right, they don't have to take the test, they can still opt out, but they will not get the GPA.
Right, we said
A 1 point
They won't
bump.
get the
the expectation is you take the class, you take the exam.
Mm-hmm.
If you want that bump with the GPA, you
No
have
matter,
to
you,
take
if
the
you get a
exam.
1, you still get a bump?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
But you may still have some students who will say, I don't want the bump and I don't want to take the test. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yep,
But you can't not take the test and get the bump.
correct.
That's not okay.
That's fair.
Oh, I shouldn't say that.
And then by each class, AP Bio, 11 students enrolled, all 11 took the exam. You know, a nice showing in AP Bio there.
Oh, that is,
That's good.
The mean score Jake is out of,
Out of 5.
out of 5.
Yeah.
Just so,
Yeah.
That's new.
Next slide's AP Chem. We didn't run it this past year, so we can skip over that. AP Physics, 16 students were enrolled, 7 took the exam, a nice average of 4. All students, yeah, all students that took the exam got a 3 or above, which is nice.
That's
Great.
low. I mean, if you're enrolled in AP Physics, why wouldn't you take the exam?
How many other AP classes were they enrolled in? Did they not want to stress themselves with too many exams? A lot of different factors can go into why a student wouldn't take it. I'd have to poll.
cost money.
Plus
Yeah.
money test.
It's like $95 a test.
I didn't have to wear my uniform, that's all.
Yeah.
And this was the teacher's first year teaching this class.
Yes, she killed
well,
it.
the first year it was taught at Campbell,
Yes.
right?
Correct.
And I think another thing to point out is, if you look at who didn't take it, I mean, there were no 1s and no 2s.
Yeah.
So the students who took it had a high level of confidence that they were
Yeah,
gonna
were
perform
prepared.
well, and did. A 3 is college level credit, so every kid got college level credit on this.
The students who did take it said it was brutal. It was one of the.
But this
they
person
did a lot
also-
of AP tests and they said that AP Physics, I was like, how was it? They were like, yeah, not good.
This person also taught an AP Math class as well.
AP Calc, yep,
Yep, okay.
2 AP Math classes.
2 trains leave Chicago.
Wow.
No word problems.
Next slide is AP Stats. 6 students were in the class, 5 took the exam. Obviously, there's room for growth with this exam.
You don't seem to have a good track record in that. In that
Stats is
class.
boring.
So is physics.
6 kids.
AP Calc AB, 16 students enrolled, 16 took the exam. Again,
Same teacher?
very well prepared.
That's great.
They did very well. The next one is AP Calc BC.
You're
Oh,
not going
sorry.
on yet. I want you to look across the 1 and 2 column.
Yeah.
Yeah, another one without any
You know,
1s and 2s.
Again,
That's great.
Dan talked about vulnerabilities, right? But I think in this case, we've got somebody knocking it out of the park year in and year out. And so our challenge, in my opinion, is how, why, what. There's a ton of questions that need to be asked here. But I just want to, I mean, that's remarkable, and it needs to be noted as remarkable.
16 students, 16 took the exams, and all got a 3 or above.
Correct.
And look how many
Just this
5s
year.
there are.
You don't get a better result than that.
No.
Exactly. So I wasn't ready to,
Technically, if they all got 5s, that'd be better.
I also heard 3 or above is college credit.
It's true.
Depending on the college, but yes.
In your
Yes.
major. Yeah.
All right, so that was, you know,
Yeah,
Yes.
Michael didn't even use his. We
yeah,
did-
so
we
sorry,
did-
Jake, I wasn't ready to move until.
That's all right.
We sang the praises there a little.
AP Calc BC, 3 students were enrolled, 3 took the exam. This was taught at the same time as AB, so these students were learning independently with support from the teacher. So they were doing double duty to teach these 3 kids.
And they were, sorry, Jake.
Nope.
And they, BC is only every other day, so AB is every
Every
day.
day.
Oh.
BC is in every other. So, yeah, the 3 that rock stars who.
Yeah. It's basically an independent study AP course, which.
Oh, yeah, I'm all set with that.
Awesome.
AP Computer Science, 15 students enrolled, 9 took the exam. AP Computer Science Principles, 12 students enrolled, 5 took the exam. Val, is one of those a dual enrollment course?
Yes,
I think they both are.
my
They're
son
both dual
took, yeah,
enrollment.
my son took them both.
So is one of them, so I have a student who's doing programming too. Is one of those AP exams for programming too? Which one?
We have programming 1, 2, and
Principal,
3.
Yeah, they're just called different things.
One of them's the A exam, one of them was the principal exam, and off the top of my head, I don't know.
Okay, that's all right, that's all right.
But I just wanted to misspeak on which one goes with which.
And what's the other AP computer?
It's 3. We have
3 programming courses. One is programming 1, which is
Yep.
just a programming course, and then 2 and 3 are
the APs.
Are both of the APs?
Yes.
Okay.
So I just don't know which exam.
But they're also dual enrollment, and this is, so I actually spoke with Mr. McDonough at length during Live to Learn about this. And I said, you know, you get 12 students enrolled and only 5 took the test. And he said, yes, because the other 7 took it for the dual enrollment.
Took the credit.
Took the credit
Okay.
rather than take the test, because they can't do both.
Oh.
So
Okay. That makes sense then.
that was, that I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of pleased to hear that. Personally, I think that, you know, we benefit our kids by offering them the dual enrollment.
There are 2 or 3 of them in computers for dual enrollment.
Meaning college.
AP Lit and Comp, 18 enrolled, 14 took the exam. US Government, 20 enrolled, 10 took the exam. US History, 8 enrolled, 8 took the exam. I think US History is one of the harder humanities exams.
Historically, AP history teachers will, the day the test comes out, they'll go to like a couple of the essays at the end, and they'll know right away whether it's gonna be a good day or a bad day. You know, I can remember my teacher looked at it, she can't be in the room, but she looked and she's like, it's Eisenhower. We're done. And I was just like, okay. So they just like know intuitively when they look at it whether.
So much, it's from like the beginning of time to present, and like there's so much material.
How much did they emphasize, and then what's the question that got picked, so.
I would assume 1776 until present, but that's just me. APES did not run this year. AP Spanish, for the first time with that one. They had one student who wanted to take the exam. And then we had a student who took 2 AP classes on VLAX and knocked it out of the park with both of them. He's quite the student. Takeaways, you know, up and down with the scores depending on the course. Number of students taking the exam was going down. I'm gonna run the AP Council next year with our AP teachers, so they'll meet monthly and just talk about AP. What's working in your class? How do you prepare? And just have a group of AP teachers talking to each other about their practice. And then we talked about, you know, what we did with the policy for the GPA bump. We'll see if that impacts number of kids taking tests or anything along those lines. And then finally, you know, my kind of overall, you know, our scores aren't where we think they could be or should be. You know, especially with our SATs, we're on a 5-year downward trend across the board when comparing ourselves to state and our overall scores. We need to work on that. It's going to be a true focus of our PLC time this year is having each department really dissect the data and see where can we help, where do we fit in. You know, continued work between Mary and I to kind of work with our new curriculum facilitators, our CFs, because we have all new ones except for our unifieds, to really kind of light a fire and do some great work this year within our PLC times. But I also think we need an overall change within the building. It's a shift back to it being an academic institution, and that's students, that's staff, that's admin, it's every little tweak that we're doing with the handbook. It's every little thing that we're going to approach in a different way to bring back this idea of, yeah, Campbell's a great school, and we're going to be a great academic school again as well. So that's our goal and what we want to work towards.
Thank you for expanding upon that, because I saw this. I'm like, well, that's great to say.
Yeah.
What's behind it?
Yeah, and it's those little tweaks. It's, you know, and again, you know, right or wrong, like it or not, the formatives thing. That's a shift from this is how we've been doing it for the past 5 years, and let's see what this gets us as far as students' attitude towards their learning. And then again, I'm going to continue working with teachers on what's the best way to deliver instruction in the classroom. What's the most effective way where we can hold kids' engagement, get them to look deeper into the content, and then be able to apply it to real world things. And that's gonna be the continued work that we do along those lines. And I think those little things, will, and again, 3 to 5 years is really how long it takes for real change to take hold. So I would love next August 17th to sit down here, my last board meeting that I get to wear shorts of the summer, and say, hey, look how much our numbers went up. I don't know if that's going to be the case, or, if I say, hey, let's hold on for one more year and see where we're at. But, the goal is that, we'll make these changes and we'll continue plugging away.
It's been status quo for a while. It's time. It's fantastic.
Questions?
We asked for data,
We
Got
got
a
it.
lot of it.
and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was very well put together, so thank you. Seeing no other questions, but before we move on to class size, we have passed the 8 o'clock, so I wanted to conclude our agenda item first. And so we are gonna go ahead and go to the second community input of the night. So Ms. Chu is
Oh, God.
making her way up.
Well, because I was thinking, oh God, I've got to wait through. So, Claire Chu, 19 Newstead Street. I want to say that I did listen to the previous school board meeting in Virginia. So I was one of those. And I was very happy to hear about the connection between the AP taking the class, getting the bump, you have to take the exam. Because that's what my student was complaining about, that it got towards right before April break, and he's like, everyone's checked out, but I'm taking this test, I want to listen. And then I wanted to say, before I came tonight, I was listening at home, eating dinner with my kids, and they said, oh, are you going? I said, I am, to talk about, to listen to the testing and the results. And I'd already looked through it, and I saw that 2 proficient at the state science. And I said something to my now senior about it, and he goes, you're never going to get good results because no 11th grader has any buy-in to the test. I'm like, okay. And this is coming from a student who, you saw 5s, he got 5s. I don't know if he's one of the 2 that got the proficient. We haven't had scores, and nobody seems to be able to tell me when we're going to get scores or how we're going to get scores.
Kids get scores. They get them. Michael got his like a month ago.
I'm going to go back on him then.
Not on AP, SAS.
On SAS.
Oh, sorry.
APs. Oh, no. Yeah, APs, fine. Corinne tells him. AP tests have come out. He goes, oh, let me go check.
So why don't they have buy-in on the SAS testing?
Because it means nothing to them. What does it mean? Half of them have finished science. Half
like
of them
that-
are taking science classes that are, I won't say watered down, but are not the physical science. They're not the chemistry, biology, physics. They're not the traditional science. They don't care. So, there you go. That's
Appreciate it.
his worth. Yep.
Thank you. All right, sliding back up. I don't see anybody else. I assume everybody's done. Okay.
You're good?
Closing community input and moving to class size reports.
So I'll have the principals jump back up to join for this in a second, but I just wanted the board to see, this is the upcoming reports. This is similar to what you've seen in the past.
Yeah, because there was a rumor that the first grade jumped up 12
But we're
students.
prepared this year to report out in exactly the way that we've been doing in the past. Kayla has it all set up and is ready to go.
They're all coming up.
The other thing is I wanted to remind the board that there are, oh, I like this teamwork. This is fabulous.
Wait, are they?
They are.
There we go. I wanted to just pause on this one for a second because, we talk about where our enrollments are now a lot. As, we watch those numbers pretty carefully. So I said to Kayla, we will grab the first day enrollment. How many kids physically show up? How many noses are sitting in our classes on that first day? We're gonna do the same thing on the first Friday,
First
which will
Friday
be on 9/8. And then the 10/2 count, which is the October 1st count this year, because it's not a Sunday.
And it won't be the same.
That's the one that matters with the state, and that's the one that anchors back to what our enrollment is, and it's given us a month more or less to get our books reconciled against every other school district. I shared with Jen, we had a fax today from another district saying, send us the records on this kiddo. So there's a kid on their way out of Litchfield Middle School, and that just came across the press today. We'll keep cleaning that up all the way until October 1st to get the number that we then do our enrollment projections based on. This year, we added the October 15th number, and I said, just capture where we are right now so that we can see. August 15th, sorry, what did I say? April?
October.
Give
Sorry.
October in mind.
August 15th. I wanted to capture where we were. And if you look at that, you can see that that's showing Griffin with a 440, the middle school at 354. Those numbers are pretty similar to last year. The Campbell number is the one that I just want to draw attention to, 384. So first time that Campbell's been under 300 students since it, or under 400 students since it opened. And, that's really the fact that 3 years ago, we had 4 classes greater than 100, and now we have the senior class with 115. And I think we have more, Jake actually called to say we had 2 more withdrawals off these numbers.
Well, I mean, you ran this yesterday.
We ran this Monday or.
I mean, when I ran it this morning, it's 83 for the freshman class, 88 for 10th graders, 93 for 11th graders, and 115 for 12th graders. So once we process some of the freshmen that aren't going to be joining us, those numbers change from Monday to today. So.
Does anybody know what we had for 8th graders going into 9th grade?
How many eighth graders left?
I mean, how many 8th graders didn't go to Campbell?
We had 95 in June.
So, and we're gonna be at 83 to start the year.
89.
Nope,
Jake just said 83.
83.
Well, that's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's a ton.
So we'll keep this updated as we go along. And now, what does this mean in terms of day-to-day operations? So here's Dan's spreadsheet that he hasn't seen yet.
What? That's not how I did it.
What I did, Dan, just to orient you to it, is, actually, I gotta shrink this back down, because it won't.
Just put it in colorful boxes.
Yeah, I linked it to the class size trigger numbers.
Yeah.
So the kindergarten number is here in pink, and then those are your kindergarten numbers. So just explain how you operationalize it, because you're showing 78 kids have been assigned into those 5 teachers. Remember, we added the 5th teacher in. You're also showing that you have 3 kids still needing placement, so they haven't been assigned into this.
Yeah.
So there's really 81. And can you explain why there are 3 kids still waiting? Just why are they not assigned in?
We wait for the completion of paperwork. They've done everything, and Joyce is a stickler to that, so they are fully enrolled except for the medical paperwork. So they're coming for all intents and purposes, but Joyce will not put them in a class until she has every duck in a row, and oftentimes it's they're waiting for the physical or something like that, or sometimes just because Joyce has processed them, it's a real number, but also Joyce doesn't place. Joyce then hands the names, and Maura and I kind of sit together with the team and figure out where they are. So the real number is 81. We have 3 students who we just need to go in and say they fit in this class.
And when you place, your goal is to balance that out, although there's other factors.
There are other factors that, yes, we shoot for with no other factors, balance classes as best as possible.
So the rumor mill was the first grade exploded and we were going to have to add another teacher. So talk us through that, Dan. I'm looking at 76 kids, and I'm looking at a trigger number of 85. Yeah. So you're way away from it.
I don't know what to talk you through. I mean, we're fine. We're safe.
Okay. But there was that room. All of a sudden, I'm like, what do you mean we're adding a 5th? Where's that coming from? Here are the numbers.
Didn't have that.
Yeah.
Now, with the first grade, it's just first and second grade have some specific conditions that make for. That's one where we can't achieve even balance across all the classes.
It was the same in kindergarten.
When I look at kindergarten and I balance what our actions were at our last meeting, right? The number was, if I recall, 86. is what was presented to the board. I have to go back and look, but is that true?
82. It was 81 to 82.
Yeah,
79 was
your
the
trigger number
so
was
76 was
77.
the trigger number we needed to get over, and we went way past it for 81.
Okay. I thought it was 86. I'm trying to figure out what happened between then and now.
We have not lost any.
Okay. I'll go back and look.
Yeah, at the last meeting, it was it was definitely 81. We thought there may have been an 82. That 82 hasn't confirmed, but we stayed steady.
Any other questions for Dan on his assignments and where he sits on it? Before I leave it, because just remember that your board policy says not exceeding 26 at the middle school. Well, it's 24 in 5th grade, which is at the middle school, and then it's 26 in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And the high school is not exceeding 30 with an asterisk, because lab classes, some special classes, for example, wood shop, for example, you're not going to put 30 kids in with spinning saws. You're going to have a different number there. So
Computer classes, we don't have 30 computers.
that's right. But I didn't carry those numbers over. So let's look at the middle school numbers, and Jen
Just
walk
quickly,
us through it.
the minutes from, if you just click on the minutes, Andrew, it says
That's what I'm looking
81.
at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was I correct?
You are
Okay.
correct.
I just wanted
81.
to know. Okay.
Yep.
So, I have ours broken down by teacher and period and classes that they have, with a total count on the right-hand side of the sum of classes, not counting period 7, which is currently best, because those are designed to be smaller class sizes and spread over all of the teachers in the building. So we're really focused on those class sizes of, in 5th grade, 19 to 24 at the highest. And some of those higher numbers are based on placements that are kind of tie our hands a little bit. 6th grade is currently our largest grade level with 98 students. However, one of the packets that Mike just handed me and another information that we got this morning brings that number down to 96 as of today. So that number is trending in the opposite direction with some folks that have moved out of town. And what I want to draw your attention to is that special services line in each of our tables. I know this is something that we always look at every year, and folks go, well, they only have a class of 2 kids for a full-time teacher. But we also aren't able to address all the places and areas that those special services teachers are covering, because there are places that, with our new model of delivery, that they are pushing into classrooms. So they're going to be in a classroom where they may be servicing an additional 6 students, but are not. That does not appear on their Power School schedule, which is where these numbers come from. So their overall assignment of students would be up to that 13, or that last number in the last line, the 13 or the 8, is their overall caseload, which is represented there at the end of that chart.
Is that true for the reading specialist too?
The reading specialist as well. At this point in time, both Mrs. Duyan and Mrs. Kramer don't have their full caseload yet, because we are looking at that tier 3. Once we have that iReady data from September, then we're going to be able to align and realign, because our special services teachers are trained in Wilson to be able to administer those services to our students, so that we can have our reading specialists and our part-time reading specialists be able to deliver more of that tier 2 services, to be able to help close those gaps for our students as well. So theirs doesn't represent their full caseload right now, but does represent some of their special education IEP written timeframes.
And I know in the past, LMS has not had Title I support for students. Is that something that we're pursuing or that we're looking into?
We've had some conversations regarding that, something that we're looking into, but yes.
I think that would be beneficial, just, overall, after seeing the data.
Absolutely.
That we have, if we can take advantage of Title I grant funding, that would be fantastic.
We need to build that tier 2 instruction. We have a great, vigorous special education instruction with a lot of resources and people. We still need people. So if you're watching at home and would like to be a paraprofessional, we'd love you. Come on and apply. We'd love you to come to our building. Also looking for our building. Hey, I remembered it. You didn't.
We'd love them more.
We would even love to have some lunch monitors, because we could use that too. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say those things. We're still actively searching for individuals and people out there. And then in grade 7, you see that yellow box, which is above our targeted number. That's our accelerated math. Mrs. Bishop has agreed to, it isn't enough to split into 2 classes without significantly impacting our other classes, and Mrs. Bishop has agreed, and that's kind of our maximum number there. And that highlighted yellow in 8th grade with Mrs. Sweet is our algebra class for our students, just to kind of let you know where we are for those numbers. And that's based on teacher recommendation and scores. Then our unified arts. The AB day schedules appear down here, so it's allowing those teachers to see more students in a shorter amount of time and allowing those students access to all of the unified arts, which they were not getting in our previous schedule. So this is just quarter 1, quarter 2, 3, 4, have different numbers in those areas.
Yeah, we snapshotted opening day numbers because it's way more complicated.
It is
with
a
the
lot, it's very complicated to look at, but if you're a parent at home trying to figure out your student's schedule, we ask you to look at that matrix view, which kind of gives you that full year view and lets you know A days and B days. We'll do it as part of announcements. Today is an A day. Head to your A day classes and they'll know. And that only A and B days only impact unified arts.
Anything else on the middle school? We'll shift up to the high school. There it goes. And Jake, just what did you snapshot? This is semester 1, so this goes through January.
Full year courses or semester 1 courses. So anything that's just semester 2 is not included on this. I will say what's not included on this, because numbers are still changing so much. Study halls, most study halls aren't on here. Case manager loads as we finalize that, and then as we are still being super flexible and creative with some of our science staffing. Some of our science classes are not finalized up there as well.
Any questions for the high school?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is really great.
3-way high five.
These numbers are better than the ones I've seen.
Oh, look at this. Look at this.
Some bonding going on here.
Are we good?
All right, that finishes up unless you have anything else to add, Dr. Jetty, regarding class size reports. So we are moving into school board comments. Anyone? 9 o'clock. You usually have something, but anyone?
I'll thank the admin team for coming out tonight and
Hanging with us.
hanging with us and giving us really good data and with context around it, so we can really kind of understand in general how we're doing and where we want to be,
And
and
the game plan, how to fix it.
the game plan and
Yeah.
what we're doing to fix it. So
Spend some time in the building next year.
yeah,
Hang out, walk around.
love to.
Absolutely. You're
I'll be
welcome.
there after school for rehearsals. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good luck in the next coming weeks. It's going to be a mad rush. Yeah.
Probably gonna be 100 degrees and sunny.
Any other school board comments?
We're gonna get summer at some point.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back to school.
Seeing none, manifest, I think, Andrew, you had a few
Yeah,
questions
a couple
on
of
one
questions here as I dive into a couple of these invoices. So we seem to have purchased 14 called smart screen TVs.
I believe so, yep. New lines, yep.
We have that many go that needed
No,
replacing?
what we're doing is replacing the projectors. So remember, we have a long-term plan to have fewer projectors in the building and to replace them with a new line TV screen. So
So is this all a Campbell or is it a
nope.
blend between?
So actually, Chris was at GMS setting some up, and I know there's a new line in a kindergarten classroom, for example. He talked about that, and I think there's a couple at the middle school also. So, but it's the projectors. If you remember, the cost of the light bulb is the cost of the projector, and the cost of the LCD screen is less than that. So it made sense to make that shift.
Remind
So
me, was this a budgeted line item?
it is.
Yes.
For the new lines and that, okay, that
Yep.
was the number.
And it's a long-term replacement. So eventually we'll have way fewer projectors. I won't say none, but way fewer, and we'll have the screens.
So you're budgeting for a certain amount of replacements every year.
Right.
Yeah, I remember,
This cycle.
this is now refreshing my memory on the budget of last year, right? Thank you. NHSAA, New Hampshire School.
New Hampshire School Administrators Association, so that is the professional association for district level leaders. Me, Mary, Doug, Sophia, I think, qualify for membership. Sorry? Oh, which is a division of SAA.
So I mean, I see season tickets and I read that, I'm like, you got season
Red
tickets to the
Sox.
game?
Yeah.
What do we
No.
got tickets for?
So they offer a variety of professional development throughout the year. So Doug and I, at the end of September, are going to a 2-day workshop on business and operations. And by buying the season pass, when I registered for it, I just said I'm using the season pass. So I don't have to cut an invoice, do another registration. So basically, you save a little bit of money by buying the season pass and attending everything. You lose money if you buy the season pass and don't go. But we always, our admin team, we take advantage of that season pass and use it for all the.
People using the season pass as much as.
Are they interchangeable? So if you're not able to go, somebody else can go?
Yeah.
That's
So
the value.
we
of
have
it.
2 season passes, and we can attend all the events all year using those 2 season passes.
Got it.
And so,
That makes sense now.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of things that are like 2 days, so we have 2 season passes for 2 days, so it's 4 people, so we can send
Yeah.
4 different people to different sessions.
Okay.
So.
and frankly, it's really good PD. Mary's actually on the
I'm
PD
actually
committee
on the
for,
CPE committee.
yeah.
There you go.
And so, I mean, we've been doing a lot of work in the last year on making sure that PE is relevant and up to date.
No.
The last one here I just noticed was Stratus Telecom. This is not one that I'm familiar with seeing in the past, and it looks like it's telephone lines, and we have, I don't know, I'm gonna say hundreds of telephone lines in this report.
Stratus,
How much is it for?
Telecom.
it's not consolidated? I thought consolidated.
It's Stratus Telecom, and it's a vendor that I hadn't seen before, or not that I'm not recalling, and the bill's almost $27.50. And I'm like, for a lot of telephone lines,
We don't have a lot of telephone lines, so.
and they're all different numbers.
We actually, I believe there are a significant number of copper lines that still come in to do fire alarms and burglar alarms, and, there's stuff that is dedicated. So
Yeah.
we shifted the phone lines
But like, I mean, there's
over
gotta-
to the internet-based, cloud-based voice.
Yeah, this is all this is all voice over IP, right? So, but there's hundreds. I'm guessing, but hundreds of lines here.
Can we get back to you on that one?
Yeah.
Because Stratus, you
And,
talk
and
about
all
Stratus.
can think of
the
clouds.
numbers are like one digit, like.
So they're all the
603,
extensions then, so they're not
473,
necessarily.
474, 475, but they're charging you as individual lines.
Yeah, let us get back to you. We'll have to have IT help us understand that, because I'm not sure.
Okay.
So once, you'll see in there too, there's another, I think it's like $168 to another company. So Chris had worked on lowering the bills for the district, and one of the things that significantly lowered the bills was actually the VoIP, moving to that system. But what we got approached by a different company that says, hey, we work with districts and municipalities, and we look to see, how can we save you more money, type of thing. And then once I told them what changes we made, they weren't as excited to work with us, because they realized they weren't gonna save us a lot of money. But they did a complete audit of our system, and they weren't able to find a lot of savings, which was good. So,
That is good. So
Stratus,
it doesn't
Stratus
look like
Com,
we're
Andrew?
paying, I'm gonna say, we're paying $4.98 per line. So I guess do the math, when you have a $2,700 bill and you're paying $5 per line. That's a lot of lines.
It is.
Yep.
We'll get back to you on that, Andrew. I mean, for example, we were talking about the elevator lift at LMS, so we had to relocate that lift. It's now almost ready to be connected at the front of the stage. It actually blends in pretty nicely there. But it needs a copper dedicated line for, if it broke midway and somebody's in a wheelchair and cannot get off the lift and it's not at the stage or at the floor, they need to press a button and get 911. And so it has to be a dedicated line by state law and ADA code, because otherwise you literally could be stranded. And if you were non-communicative and can't do anything other than push that button, that's a problem. Now, so there's another copper line that you can't get rid of, and you're gonna pay X number of dollars a month to have there. When the reality of a school, the likelihood that somebody's stranded in the LMS cafeteria between the two things with nobody around is slim to none, but you gotta meet the code. So there's more of those than you realize that are dedicated for those purposes.
No other questions on manifest, anybody else? All right, then we are ready to move into a non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A:3, the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, or the disciplining of such employee, or the investigation of any charges against him, unless the employee affected has a right to a meeting, and 2, request that the meeting be open, in which case the request shall be granted. B, the hiring of any person as a public employee. C, matters which, if discussed in public, would adversely affect the reputation of any person other than a member of the body or agency itself, unless such person requests an open meeting. And now we have this fancy D through, I think it says L, C citation. For tonight's purposes, I believe we are discussing RSA, the :B, the B section, and the C section. I don't believe we're doing any. And
No C-section.
no, nothing under the A section. Correct?
I believe that's accurate.
Just for clarity and full disclosure. So is there a motion to go into non-public?
So made.
Second?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor of going into non-public, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 5-0-0.
Mary, can you kick that shut, please?
Thank you very much, have a good night, and we will see you back here. We actually have an extra, I think we have 2 more Wednesdays, so we'll be back
So
the first week of
there are
September.
5
So there's
Wednesdays.
5 Wednesdays this month, but
September 6th, we're back.
September 6th.